hours of G-Top bedtime crime lore. If you ain't sleeping, grab some snacks, because this is a long one. You can lie back, let the lights dim, and just let the entire criminal history of Grand Theft Auto wash over you while you drift off, or while you grind some heists in the background. Tonight we're not just talking about one city, or one game. We're walking through every major criminal organization in GTA history, from the chunky pixel era of GTA 1 and 2, all the way to the chaos of GTA Online. Street gangs, old school mafias, doomed cartels, biker clubs that smell like meth and leather, shady corporations, and paramilitary outfits that pretend they're legitimate security companies. If it runs rackets, starts wars, or quietly owns half a city, it's on the list. We'll start right at the beginning, back when Liberty City, Vice City, and San Andreas were top-down sprites, and the gangs were basically colored blobs with very loud guns. Then we move into the 3D era, GTA 3's Leone Family, locking down Liberty City, Vice City's coke-fueled syndicates, San Andreas, with the families, and the Ballas, turning a neighborhood feud into a decades-long war. After that, we slide through the story spin-offs that quietly fill in all the gaps you might have skipped. From there, we hit the HD era. GTA 4's fractured Liberty City with the Pegorinos and Russians tearing each other apart. GTA vs Los Santos, where the Ballas family's feud has evolved but never really healed, and Merryweather and the Fib act like legal entities while operating as straight-up criminal organizations. In reality, some of the most powerful gangs in GTA are wearing suits or uniforms. The style tonight is simple. Casual, conversational, slightly dramatic info dump. Minimal pauses. We're going city by city, era by era, watching how each organization rises, falls, and sometimes crawls back out of the grave in a later game. The Leone family showing up across multiple titles. The Vance crime family building itself out of repeated failures. The way certain cartels get name-dropped years after they're supposedly gone. All of that suggests Rockstar has a quiet, connected underworld timeline running in the background. We're going to lean on in-game dialogue, mission setups, radio chatter, and background lore as evidence. It's also revealed that some of the most important power shifts only show up in throwaway lines or loading screen text, so this would make a lot more sense in the context of you just letting it all play out. If you zone out for 10 minutes and wake up in a different city, don't worry, we'll recap the big players so you can reorient. If you just love GTA V lore, or you want something chill and slightly unhinged humming in the background, stay to the end. Because by the time we're done, it's believed that you'll be able to point to any GTA map and say who really controls that world across every era and every timeline. So to keep you from getting lost in a maze of purple jackets, gold chains, and bad haircuts, we need a map. Not just a map of the cities, but a map of the timelines. Because GTA doesn't really have one clean canon. It has 3 overlapping ones, pretending they don't know each other. You've got the 2D era, with the old school GTA 1 and 2 style syndicates, where Liberty City and San Andreas are basically crime playgrounds with pixelated psychos. Then the 3D era, with GTA 3, Vice City, San Andreas, and the Stories games, where Liberty City, Vice City, and San Andreas exist again, but in a different continuity with different histories. After that, the HD era, which is GTA IV, V, and Online, with yet another Liberty City and Los Santos. Same names, different worlds. So if you ain't sleeping and you hear me say Leone Family or Ballas, you need to know which universe we're actually in. To keep it straight, we're going to group every criminal outfit into a few big categories that we'll keep circling back to. You've got street gangs like the Families, the Ballas, and the Varios gangs, who live and die over colors and corners. Traditional mafias like the Leone family and the Pavanos, who run rackets and sit in restaurants pretending they're legitimate. Cartels and smuggling rings, from the Vance operation in Vice City to the Madrazo and Azteca-linked networks around Blaine County. Biker clubs like the Lost MC, who somehow manage to be both terrifying and deeply sad at the same time. Corporate and white-collar crime, like Life Invader, the Duggins, and all the faceless holding companies that quietly own half the map. And then the paramilitary and government-adjacent groups, the FIB, the IA, Merryweather, private security, all the people who commit crimes while technically being the good guys. Each era also has city hubs that act like magnets. Liberty City is the Mafia and Eastern European nexus, where families like the Leones in the 3D era and the Pegorinos and Enchiladas in the HD era define who lives and who vanishes on those docks. Vice City is the cocaine and cartel capital, where it's believed that the Vance organization rises from small-time smuggling and Vice City stories into a full-blown crime family built on the ashes of failed deals. San Andreas and later Los Santos are your gang and corporate battlegrounds, where Grove Street and the Ballas evolve into the families and Ballas of Gita V, while corporations and real estate sharks quietly do more damage than any drive-by. Then you've got smaller but important spots like Alderney, which acts as Liberty's dirty backyard for heavy mob business, and places like Ludendorff, where one quiet snow town holds the key to Michael and Trevor's entire HD-era story. Chronologically, we'll move from those early, almost faceless GTA 1 and 2 syndicates, into the 3D-era power struggles of Liberty City, Vice City, and San Andreas, then into IV and V's more grounded crime worlds, and finally into GTA Online, where your character's empire slowly overwrites a lot of the old guard. It's also revealed that, in Online, groups like the Duggins and even the Madrazo Connections start getting pushed aside by player-run organizations, which kind of makes you the final boss of GTA canon, whether you meant to be or not. Because this is a long one, and the web gets messy fast, we'll be dropping mini recaps every few sections, reminding you who runs which city in which era. This would make a lot more sense in the context of some returning names too, so watch for families like the Leones, gangs like the Ballas, and outfits like the Vance organization to pop up in multiple timelines. When they do, we'll stop, zoom in, and show you the long arcs and the hidden connections that Rockstar buried between games. Before we move into our first real era of organized chaos. So, before we get lost in HD textures and motion captured mobsters, you kind of have to go back to when all of this was just pixels and chaos. If you ain't sleeping yet, this is where Gita's criminal ecosystem starts as a rough sketch that already looks suspiciously familiar. Gita 1 drops you into 3 cities that should sound very familiar: Liberty City, San Andreas, and Vice City. They're primitive, top-down, and pretty much just collections of colored blocks, but the structure is already there, because each city is carved up by competing syndicates. You've got local gangs holding little slices of turf. You've got mafias that feel like early prototypes of Liberty City's families. And you've got these weirder outfits that don't fit cleanly into street or mob. The game doesn't stop to explain who's importing what or who's laundering money where, but the mission structure quietly tells you that every district has an owner, and you're just a freelance problem solver passing through. The clearest example of that is the Zaibatsu Corporation. Zaibatsu is presented as this pharmaceutical and industrial megacorp, but in reality it's basically a cartel with a logo and a PR department. They have their own private army of goons driving branded cars. They pay for assassinations like they're ordering office supplies. And they'll happily start citywide turf wars over business. It's believed that Zaibatsu is Rockstar's first full commit to the idea that in this universe, corporations aren't just corrupt, they are straight-up gangs with better lawyers. If you look at Merryweather in GTA V, or all the fake tech and security companies in Online, Zaibatsu is the grandparent that shows you where that satire started. GTA 2 doubles down on that with the faction system. You land in this weird retro future city where Zaibatsu shares space with groups like the Loonies, the Yakuza, the SR scientists, and the Russian Mafia. You can walk up to any of them, start doing jobs, and the game tracks your respect with a little meter. Help Zaibatsu, and they love you. But the Loonies start shooting on sight, run errands for the SR scientists, and suddenly their rivals treat you like a target. It's also revealed that even basic pedestrians react differently as your reputation shifts, which quietly suggests that the city's power balance is alive, even if it's all running on 90s hardware. None of these gangs are deeply written. They're more like archetypes with a costume and a jingle. The Loonies are chaotic, the Yakuza are disciplined, Zaibatsu is corporate evil, the Russians are blunt force. But this would make a lot more sense in the context of later games, because you start to see the same ideas repeated. Gangs as brands, corporations as criminals, and cities as layered battlegrounds where multiple factions overlap instead of one clean hierarchy. Most of the GTA 1 and 2 organizations never come back by name, but their DNA is everywhere, from Liberty City's mafias to GTA Online's shell companies and legit fronts. The real question is, once the series goes 3D and the stories get personal, who actually ends up running things when the law itself starts acting like just another gang? When the law starts acting like just another gang, Liberty City is where you really see what that looks like. If you ain't sleeping, grab some snacks, because this is a long one in terms of how many times the same 3 Italian last names keep showing up. Liberty City in the 3D era is basically Ita's mafia capital. This is where the Leone, Forelli, and Sindacco families lock the whole place into a 3-way power structure that doesn't just stay in one city. It bleeds into Vice City through old Forelli connections, into San Andreas through the Sindaccos and Leones, and it's believed that a lot of the mysterious backers you hear about on radios and in background dialogue are just these same families moving money around. Chronologically, Liberty City Stories is where you first see the board being set. It's 1998, a few years before GTA 3, and Tony Cipriani is back from hiding after killing a made man. Salvatore Leone is still the boss, still paranoid, and still trying to keep the Leones on top, while everyone else smells blood. During this game, you watch Tony run protection rackets, sabotage rivals, and even work with non-Italian groups when it benefits Salvatore, which explains why by 2001, the Leones look like the only family that still has any real structure left. The Leones are the traditionalists, but they're not stupid. They still do the old school stuff like gambling, unions, and protection, but Salvatore is willing to cut deals with hackers, drug runners, and even the player character if it keeps him ahead. Vita the Third quietly shows the end result of all that work. By the time Claude shows up, the Leones are the closest thing Liberty City has to a functioning mafia government, even if it's also revealed that Salvatore's paranoia is about to wreck it from the inside. The Forellis, on the other hand, are the older name. They used to be powerful enough to send guys like Tommy Vercetti to Vice City in the 80s. But that whole fiasco, plus internal backstabbing, leaves them weaker by the late 90s. Liberty City Stories suggest they're living off reputation more than actual muscle. They still show up, still cause trouble, but you can feel they're on the way down. The Sindaccos are the upstarts. They're pushing into Las Venturas, trying to use casino fronts and out-of-state operations to leapfrog the older families. In reality, that expansion is what drags them into open war with the Leones in San Andreas, and you see just how fragile they really are once things go bad on the desert strip. Around all of this, Liberty City is full of non-Italian crews. You've got the Triads in Chinatown, the Yakuza moving in on construction and docks, the Yardis in Staunton, all carving out their own turf. But the backbone across multiple games is still the Italian Mafia's internal politics. When the Leones fight the Sindaccos, the Triads suddenly get more room. When the Forelli stumble, the Yakuza quietly grab assets. This would make a lot more sense in the context of how the Leones keep showing up, even when you switch states. Because the Leone family doesn't just stay in Liberty City. Their story leaks into San Andreas through their Las Venturas casino deal. And that deal is one of the dominoes that helps topple other organizations we'll get into. Once you see how one paranoid Don in Liberty City accidentally kicks off chain reactions across the whole 3D era, you start to realize why tracking the Leones is the perfect way to dive deeper into GTA's criminal history. So when you follow that one paranoid Don, you land right on Salvatore Leone, the aging king of Liberty City, who's still dangerous enough that you don't joke about his cholesterol around him. In Liberty City stories, you see him, in 1998, already old, already stubborn, but still sharp enough to play the city like a chessboard. Tony Cipriani is his loyal attack dog, the guy who just got back from hiding after killing a made man, and Salvatore uses him for everything that might get bloody or politically messy. During Liberty City stories, Tony helps Salvatore crush the Sindaccos and push back the Forellis, two rival mafia families trying to carve up his territory while he's slowing down. Missions like Sindacco Sabotage and the Trouble with Triads show how Salvatore is still clinging to old-school honor, but he's also forced into new markets because the world around him is changing. The Leones dip into drugs, protection, and especially casinos through their Las Venturas partners, and it's believed that this is where that infamous Caligula's Palace deal with the San Andreas cast starts brewing in the background. He still hates outsiders, though. In Chaperone, when Tony has to escort Salvatore's wife, you hear how Salvatore talks about Liberty City, about loyalty, about people he doesn't trust. It's also revealed that even inside his own family, he's constantly testing people, sending Tony to clean up messes created by guys like Joey and Luigi. That paranoia makes sense in reality because he's fighting on all sides. The Sindaccos and Forellis on one flank, the Triads on another, and corrupt cops and politicians he has to keep paying off, just to stand still. By the time you jump to GTA 3 in 2001, grab some snacks, because this is a long one in terms of fallout. Salvatore is still the boss, but Liberty City has modernized around him. The Triads are stronger, the Yakuza are moving in, street gangs like the Diablos and Yardis are more aggressive, and every mission you do for the Leones quietly suggests they're losing ground. In Salvatore's call to meeting, you see him obsessing over betrayal, while in jobs like cutting the grass, he uses Claude to spy on his own people. That's the big irony. He hates outsiders, but he keeps hiring them. When he orders Claude's execution and Maria helps you escape, his paranoia finally backfires. Claude later works with the Yakuza, and Salvatore ends up assassinated, shot outside his own club, by the same silent guy he thought he controlled. If you ain't sleeping by now, you start to see the pattern. Salvatore's world is collapsing because he can't adapt. Their reach goes beyond Liberty City. In San Andreas, the Leones' partnership and rivalry with the Sindaccos and Forellis at Caligula's Palace drags CJ into a three-way mafia war. And this would make a lot more sense in the context of Salvatore desperately trying to keep casino money flowing as his home turf slips away. Their clashes with Triads, Yakuza, and local gangs across games turn the Leones into the perfect symbol of old-school mafia power, slowly getting eaten by newer, louder players that will meet in the next city. And if you ain't sleeping yet, this is where you see what happens when a family tries to play Leone-level chess with checkers brains. Because for every Salvatore hanging on in Liberty City, you've got the Forelli and Sindacco names turning into punchlines. The Forelli family is the first big lesson. In the 1980s, Sonny Forelli basically treats Vice City like his personal ATM. He sends Tommy Vercetti down as muscle, expects him to stay a loyal errand boy, and keeps skimming Sonny drug money back to Liberty City while the Leones are still mostly homebound. It's believed that for a while, the Forellis are actually the top dogs in the wider universe, pulling strings in Vice City and Liberty at the same time. The problem is, Sonny never updates the software. He still thinks fear and long-distance threats are enough. During the events of Vice City, Sonny underestimates Tommy so badly that he literally walks into the lion's den at the Vercetti estate, expecting a payout. Instead, he gets ambushed and killed, and a huge chunk of Forelli leadership dies with him. In reality, that one bad read turns their empire into a hollow brand. By the late 1990s in Liberty City stories, you see Forelli guys reduced to side players, losing territory to the Leones and even begging for protection deals. Missions where Tony Cipriani humiliates them, blowing up their cars or wrecking their rackets, quietly explain how fast a big family can become background noise. The Sindaccos go for a different strategy and somehow crash even harder. They don't have a Sonny-style old empire, so they try to build one through Las Venturas casinos. Johnny Sindacco and his crew get into Caligula's palace, partner up with the Leones, and think they've hacked the system. East Coast mob money, West Coast real estate, and a neutral playground in the desert. It's also revealed that they're stretched thin back home, so this casino project is their big bet. Then CJ shows up. Because Salvatore brings in Grove Street muscle to stabilize things, you get this weird three-way relationship where the Sindaccos think they're equals, the Leones see them as disposable, and CJ is just there to rob everyone. Missions like the meat business and the whole Las Venturas heist arc slowly strip the Sindaccos of dignity. You kidnap Johnny, terrify him so badly he dies of a heart attack, sabotage Caligula's from the inside, and walk out with the money that was supposed to save their family. By the early 2000s, the pattern is clear. The Leones limp on, still clinging to liberty. The Forellis and Sindaccos become cautionary tales, names associated with blown deals, dead bosses, and casinos they couldn't hold. And if you grab some snacks and stay with it, you'll see this exact arc repeat when newer gangs and corporations start eating the old mafia alive in the next city we visit. And Liberty City is where you really see that pattern break. Because once you zoom in past the Leones, you realize the city's underworld is not just Italian guys arguing in social clubs. It's a whole international buffet of people who also want you dead. The Triads in GTA 3 and Liberty City stories are the first big reminder of that. They run Chinatown in Portland, they control key smuggling routes through the docks, and they treat crime like a logistics company with more machetes. It's believed that their operations are tightly organized around import-export fronts, which explains why you keep seeing their trucks and warehouses tied to weapons and contraband during missions. They clash hard with the Leone family because they're not interested in being junior partners in anyone's empire, and Salvatore treating them like expendable muscle just accelerates that war. In reality, the Triads are business first, respect second, and violence third. But they're completely fine moving those priorities around when a Leone car accidentally drives through Chinatown. You see this in Liberty City stories when Tony gets sent on those almost suicidal raids into their turf. And again in GTA 3, when the Triads end up blowing up the Leone casino. That one moment quietly tells you the old mafia doesn't have a monopoly on heavy firepower anymore. Then you jump across the water to Staunton Island and meet the Yakuza. Asuka and Kenji Kasen run a more disciplined, almost ritualistic organization out of their casino and construction fronts. On the surface, they come off as more honorable, with codes, etiquette, and Asuka actually paying Claude and treating him like a professional. But if you ain't sleeping, you notice how fast that honor disappears when power is on the line. Asuka uses Claude as a disposable scalpel in her internal family politics. And it's also revealed that Kenji's death can literally be caused by Claude while disguised as a Colombian. just to frame the cartel and push the Yakuza deeper into their quiet war. That war with the Colombian cartel is almost never shouted about, but it's everywhere in the background. The Yakuza attack cartel fronts, sabotage their drug trade, and carve out territory in Staunton, not by spray painting walls, but by buying buildings and blowing up whoever doesn't get the memo. Then you've got the Yardies, Jamaican gang, colorful cars, heavy accents, and a strong presence in Staunton's more chaotic streets. They're deep into drugs and street-level enforcement, often rolling with the Diablos, which suggests a kind of loose alliance of smaller, louder gangs trying to survive between giants. They're not as disciplined as the Triads or as ceremonial as the Yakuza, but they're fast, brutal, and constantly in shootouts with whoever happens to be in their way that afternoon. This would make a lot more sense in the context of globalization. Liberty City stops feeling like Mafia Town and starts looking like a mosaic of Triads, Yakuza, Yardies, cartels, and Italians all fighting over the same blocks with totally different playbooks. And if you grab some snacks and stay with it, this multi-ethnic, multi-faction structure gets even wilder in the HD era, when Eastern European, Albanian, and Russian groups show up in GTA IV and quietly rewrite who really owns Liberty streets. And right as Liberty starts filling up with all these different flags and accents, Rockstar drops in a group that doesn't care about tradition at all. They just care about powder. The Colombian cartel in GTA 3 shows up as this blunt instrument of the new drug age, and you meet them in the most personal way possible. Catalina putting a bullet in you during a bank job and walking off with Miguel and the money. That betrayal is basically the starting gun for the entire 3D era drug boom. Claude isn't just chasing an ex, he's chasing the organization that represents everything, wiping out the old Leone-style honor system. The cartel is running large-scale narcotics into Liberty. They're tied into construction rackets through the Fort Staunton site, and it's believed that they're laundering cash through half the city's new developments. While the Italians are arguing over sit-downs, the Colombians are buying cement mixers and assault rifles. Their tactics explain the shift really clearly. The cartel doesn't do quiet. You see heavily armed soldiers in blue combat gear, Uzis out in broad daylight, cartel cruisers rolling around like mobile bunkers, and even attack helicopters during missions like Grand Theft Auto. They've got fortified compounds in Cedar Grove and Staunton Island, complete with guard towers and patrols, which makes Liberty look less like a mob town and more like a low-budget war zone. In reality, they feel closer to a paramilitary outfit than a traditional crime family. This is where the contrast hits you. The Leone family plays politics. They work through lawyers, judges, and union bosses. Salvatore worries about respect and betrayal behind closed doors. The Colombian cartel just levels a neighborhood if someone annoys them. When they bomb Fort Staunton, it's also revealed that they're literally reshaping the map to protect their construction interests, which is a pretty extreme version of urban planning. If you ain't sleeping by this point, you can see how the game quietly tells you who the future belongs to. And that future is drugs. Once the Colombians kick the door in, every city you visit runs on narcotics. Vice City is basically the glamorous prequel to this, where Ricardo Diaz and later the Vance crime family ride the early cocaine wave that the cartel will industrialize in Liberty. San Andreas takes the same idea and drags it into alleys and trap houses with crack, Ballas versus Grove Street, and corrupt cops like Tenpenny, making sure the product keeps moving. By GTA V and online, the blueprint is fully global. Meth labs, weed farms, cocaine lockups, acid labs, all of it just feels like scaled-up versions of what the Colombian cartel started. Private armies, fortified drug sites, and businessmen pretending they're legitimate. This would make a lot more sense in the context of Martin Madrazo's operation too, because his cartel in Los Santos basically inherits that role as the high-end, ultra-violent drug power. The names change from Colombians to Mexicans to whoever you're selling for in online, but the model stays the same. And the next groups you meet are just different flavors of that same drug empire template. So, if you ain't sleeping yet, grab some snacks, because we're leaving Madrazo's modern cartel world and going straight back to where Hita really fell in love with cocaine, Vice City in the 1980s. Vice City is Rockstar's Miami, turned up to 11. Neon everywhere, pink suits, synth music, and speedboats cutting across the bay at 3 a.m. You've got Colombian suppliers flying product in by the ton, and local distributors carving up the coastline. Ricardo Diaz is the loudest of them, sitting in his mansion like a coked-up king, while guys like the Vance brothers are trying to move weight without getting killed, robbed, or both during the same deal. Diaz's cartel is the closest thing Vice City has to a top dog when you first see it. He's plugged into the Colombian pipeline, pays off cops, and uses sheer paranoia as a management style. The Vance operation, run by Victor and Lance, is smaller but ambitious, trying to jump from mid-level runners to serious players. Around them you've also got the Cubans, led by Humberto Robina, who mix national pride with street-level extortion and smuggling, and the Haitians under Antipoulet, who control their own corners and use guerrilla tactics instead of flashy mansions. On top of that, the real sharks aren't always the ones with guns out. Corrupt businessmen and politicians quietly own half the city. Guys like Avery Carrington, sleazy developers, and city officials take cartel money, flip land, and turn blood into beachfront property. The game never needs to spell it out, but everything you do suggests that every nightclub, dock, and construction site is just another laundering front. Tommy Vercetti gets dropped into this mess as a Forelli enforcer sent down from Liberty City. He's supposed to supervise a simple drug deal with the Vance brothers, but the whole thing gets ambushed. The money and coke vanish, and everyone starts pointing fingers. After the botched deal, Tommy realizes he can't just run back to Sonny Forelli with excuses. He starts working as a freelancer, taking jobs from Diaz, the Cubans, the Haitians, anyone who can help him track down who set him up. During this climb, you watch him systematically dismantle Diaz's empire from the inside. It's believed that Diaz himself either ordered the ambush or at least benefited from it, and that explains why Tommy eventually turns on him. After earning Diaz's trust, Tommy storms the mansion, kills him, and takes over the whole operation, right down to the decor. The alliances around him are constantly shifting. Tommy does missions where he helps Humberto's Cubans fight the Haitians, then turns around and runs errands for Antipoulet, while basically drugged out of his mind. He plays both sides because he's not trying to solve their war. He's trying to make sure that when the smoke clears, he owns the city. It's also revealed that, by the end, he's created the Vercetti crime family, controlling properties, rackets, and most of the drug flow, with Lance as his increasingly unstable partner. This would make a lot more sense in the context of Vice City Stories, which rolls the clock back a couple of years. You see Victor Vance trying to build a stable crime family in a city that's designed to chew guys like him up. In reality, that prequel shows how fragile all of this is. The same docks, the same cartels, the same corrupt officials, just waiting for the next guy like Tommy to flip the board and write his name over everyone else's. So when Vice City Stories drops you into 1984, you're basically watching an earlier version of Tommy's dream, but with the Vance brothers trying to hold it together with duct tape and family loyalty. Victor Vance is a soldier first, a businessman second, and a criminal only because the city keeps dragging him that way. Vic starts out stationed at Fort Baxter, trying to send money back home and keep his nose clean, but his corrupt superior, Jerry Martinez, pulls him into off-the-books smuggling. During this, it's revealed that Victor really doesn't want anything to do with drugs. He's okay with guns, okay with side hustles, but cocaine is where he draws the line, because he's already seen what it does to people like his brother Lance. In reality, that line doesn't last long in Vice City. As Victor gets kicked out of the army and thrown into the streets, he starts building something that looks like a real organization. He teams up with Phil Cassidy for weapons, does protection work for shady businessmen like Marty J. Williams, and even ends up guarding Phil Collins during that infamous concert mission. Each job pulls him a little deeper into the cocaine economy of the city, because that's where the real money is, and every rival already has their hands in it. The Vance crime family at this point is small but ambitious. It's believed that they're more of a loose coalition than a rigid mafia. Victor, Lance, a few trusted soldiers, and a rotating set of allies. They link up with the Cubans, they deal with bikers, they try to carve out territory in places that guys like Ricardo Diaz haven't locked down yet. The structure works only as long as everybody respects Victor's calm approach, and as long as bigger players don't decide to crush them. The problem is Lance. Lance Vance is charismatic, impulsive, and way too in love with the fast life. He keeps pushing Victor toward bigger coke deals, reckless plays, and risky alliances. This would make a lot more sense in the context of what you see later in Vice City, where Lance sells Tommy out for basically the same reasons. During Vice City stories, that tension is already there. Victor wants stability. Lance wants the highlight reel. Their empire is built on shifting sand, family drama, addiction, greed, and a city that rewards betrayal. When Diaz and the outside cartel start squeezing, those cracks split wide open. The betrayals around the final deal get Victor killed in a botched drug run, and if you ain't sleeping, you realize that single gunshot echoes straight into 1986. Lance crawls out of that mess desperate, grieving, and still hungry, which explains why he latches onto Tommy Vercetti so quickly. By the time you meet Lance in Vice City, he's basically trying to rebuild the Vance dream using Tommy as the new Victor. Grab some snacks, because as we move forward, you'll see how Tommy learns from every failed family like this, and how many other so-called empires are waiting to die the exact same way. And if you ain't sleeping yet, this is where Vice City stops being just neon mob fantasies and turns into something way messier. Because under all the cocaine palaces, you've got two street-level armies fighting over pride, race, and a couple of blocks of asphalt. Humberto Robina is the loudest face of that. He's the Cuban gang boss who runs Caf Robina, and half his personality is pure macho theater. He talks like a war hero, flexes in front of his guys, and then sends you to do the actual work. The Cubans are rooted in Vice City's exile and immigrant communities, using small boats, old family connections, and local bars as their network. They're into smuggling, protection rackets, and street-level enforcement, and it's believed that a lot of their power comes from knowing every dock worker and every back alley from Little Havana to the Marina. On the other side, you've got Auntie Poulet and the Haitians. She's not a gun-toting boss. She's this calm, almost grandmotherly leader sitting in a rundown little Haiti house, using tea, medicine, and that heavy voodoo aesthetic to keep people in line. The game leans hard into that imagery, with shrines, chants, and Poulet's hypnotic voice, which suggests she runs her gang as much through belief and fear as through guns and money. The Haitians control their own blocks, small businesses, and drug corners, and they're constantly butting heads with the Cubans over territory and respect. Tommy Vercetti walks into this and does what a good future kingpin does. He plays both sides. During one stretch of the story, you're running missions for Humberto, blowing up Haitian drug operations and pushing their people out of key spots. Then you flip and work for Auntie Poulet, who literally drugs Tommy with her tea, sending him out in a haze to attack Cuban positions. It's also revealed that Tommy barely remembers what he did for her, which explains why he treats those missions like blackouts once he's sober. This would make a lot more sense in the context of how Vice City's big players operate. Diaz, the Vance remnants, even the future Vercetti estate, all depend on these mid-level gangs to actually move product and hold corners. The Cubans and Haitians aren't global cartels or formal mafias. They're deeply local, identity-based crews. But when they go to war, cars explode in the middle of main roads, businesses burn, and entire neighborhoods become no-go zones. In reality, their feud reshapes who can safely move drugs, who can launder money, and which properties suddenly become cheap enough for Tommy to invest in. Pattern interrupt for you. While you're busy watching Tommy scream about honor in Little Havana, he's quietly using the chaos to lock down assets like Sunshine Autos, The Print Works, and later Full Supply Chains. Their blood feud becomes his business plan. And this idea doesn't stay in Vice City. Later, you'll see San Andreas with the families in Ballas, and Gita V with their evolved sets where turf, colors, and culture matter just as much as whatever's in the duffel bag. Grab some snacks, because these neighborhood wars are about to scale up into full-blown state history. So now you're in Los Santos, early 90s, fake LA, with real problems, where the map isn't just streets and freeways, it's colors, sets, and who controls the corner. If you ain't sleeping, this is a long one, because San Andreas turns basic turf wars into full-blown history. Los Santos at this point is basically a low-res documentary on South Central. You've got purple Ballas, green Grove Street families, yellow Los Santos Vagos, and blue Varios Los Aztecas, all carving up neighborhoods, alleys, and freeway underpasses. Each gang has its own cars, tags, and dress codes. It's believed that half the pedestrians you drive past are technically in somebody's set, even if they're just standing outside a liquor store. The cops treat whole districts like write-offs, which explains why gangs end up acting like city government for their blocks. The Grove Street families are supposed to be the good guys, or at least the less bad guys. They started as a big community-focused set, old-school West Coast gangbangers who were proud of being anti-crack. Sweet and the older OGs talk about barbecues, block parties, and keeping drugs out of Ganton. Because in reality, crack isn't just a hustle, it's what wiped out a whole generation. Grove used to run multiple sets across Los Santos, but by the time San Andreas starts, it's revealed that they've been bleeding territory for years. Internal drama kills them almost as much as bullets. You've got different family sets like Seville and Temple feuding with each other, members quietly dealing on the side, and leaders who can't agree if they're running a business or a community project. Sweet is stubborn and proud. CJ dipped out to Liberty City after Brian's death, and that split gives the Ballas room to move in. This would make a lot more sense in the context of how crack money hits the city. Anyone willing to sell gets rich fast, and Grove's anti-crack stance suddenly looks like bad business. The Ballas are the opposite. They're organized, flashy, and fully on board with the crack economy. Purple jackets, customized lowriders, and the kind of firepower you don't get from just boosting cars. It's also revealed that they're backed up by outside suppliers and protected by corrupt cops like Tenpenny and Pulaski, which suggests why they can roll deep in police-heavy areas and walk away untouched. During the years before CJ comes home, the Ballas push into key Grove blocks, take over dealers, and turn once neutral spots like Jefferson into purple strongholds. Around them, Varios Los Aztecas and Los Santos Vagos are running their own parallel wars. Cesar leads the Aztecas, blue and white, proud, territorial, and focused on respect as much as money. The Vagos are wilder, yellow bandanas, heavy drug ties, and constant beef with Aztecas over the eastern side of the city and the freeway routes. In reality, these four gangs create a grid where almost every intersection is somebody's border. And this Ballas family's feud doesn't stay trapped in the 90s. Decades later, when Franklin steps into Getafe, the names have shifted to the families and the modern Ballas, but the colors, the streets, and the old grudges are still loaded, just waiting for a new protagonist to drive through. So when you roll into San Andreas with CJ, You're not just joining some random green versus purple cosplay. You're walking into a war that's already gone nuclear off screen. By 1992, the Ballas have basically turned crack into a weapon of mass destruction. They flood Grove Street turf with dealers and pipe stems, and it's believed that half the neighborhood is either using, selling, or looking the other way because the money's good and the cops don't see purple cars. This would make a lot more sense in the context of Frank Tenpenny, a CRH officer who's supposed to be fighting gangs, but instead decides to pick a winner. Tenpenny feeds the Ballas information and protection, and in return, they help him keep the city unstable. You see that play out during missions like Drive-By, where CJ, Sweet, Ryder, and Smoke roll around shooting up Balla corners. On the surface, it's just a classic guitar shootout, but the game quietly shows you how deep it goes. The Ballas are organized, they're defending drug spots, and the cops only really show up when Grove Street fires back. Before the game even starts, their strategy already hits home. CJ's mother, Beverly, is killed in a drive-by that was meant for Sweet. The Ballas pull up on Grove Street with SMGs, spray the house, and leave a family shattered. That one attack breaks Sweet's grip on the gang, drives CJ out to Liberty City, and leaves room for guys like Big Smoke and Ryder to start cutting deals behind the scenes. In reality, the gang you return to is half dead and half bought. CJ's whole arc is trying to drag Grove Street out of that grave. He starts small, tagging walls, jumping Ballas on corners, and pushing dealers out of the hood. As you reclaim territory, the map literally turns green again, and it's also revealed that Smoke and Ryder are the ones selling that map to the enemy. Missions like the Green Saber show how the Ballas' street violence is welded to institutional corruption. Tenpenny sets up Sweet, tips off the Ballas, and uses Grove Street's own car as bait. You think you're rolling deep, but you're just driving into an execution. By the time CJ hunts down Ryder in the docks and Big Smoke in his crack fortress, you've seen every layer of that alliance. Purple soldiers on the corners, corrupt cops pulling strings, cartel connections moving product out of Los Santos and into the state. If you ain't sleeping, you can trace a straight line from that chaos to what you see in GTA. Decades later, the colors are still the same, but the volume's turned down. The families and modern Ballas are more low-key, half-broke, and boxed in by corporate crime. Franklin grows up in this world, stuck between Lamar's obsession with old-school set tripping and the reality that the real money is in heists, real estate scams, and FIB-backed operations. You still get deadly moments, like Ballas ambushes in Hood Safari, but the war feels tired, like everybody's reenacting a conflict they inherited. Grab some snacks, because this is a long one. That's the real horror of the Ballas family's feud. It's one of Gita's longest-running wars, outliving CJ, Sweet's prime, and even most of the guys doing the shooting. Kids are born into colors they didn't choose, beefs they don't understand, and streets already claimed decades earlier. And the really scary part is who quietly steps in to profit once the gangs burn each other out. And this is where the green versus purple story breaks down. Because once you step out of Grove Street and roll a little east, you hit a whole different layer of Los Santos politics. Varios Los Aztecas are the first big reminder that San Andreas isn't just a two-color war. Cesar Villalpando is the face of that. He's not just Kendall's boyfriend, he's the proud Chicano shot caller holding down El Corona and the surrounding barrios. His gang is obsessed with territory, lowrider culture, and respect. You see it right away in that lowrider meet, where CJ has to literally bounce his way into their trust. That whole scene explains a lot. Aztecas care about style and honor as much as firepower, and they're not about to hand either of those over to some outsider from Grove. At first, Cesar is wary of CJ because he knows Grove beef attracts heat, and his people are already squeezed between Ballas, Vagos, and cops who don't care about the difference. But after the betrayal at the Mulholland garage and the whole Big Smoke drug conspiracy, Cesar becomes one of CJ's most important allies. It's also revealed that he's one of the few leaders who actually puts family over ego. He brings CJ into his own problems, like the drive-bys in East Los Santos and the turf wars with Los Santos Vagos, and they start running joint operations against mutual enemies. Los Santos Vagos are the opposite energy. Yellow jerseys, desert dry humor, and absolutely no chill. They're a more chaotic, drug-heavy gang, with outside suppliers and connections that stretch way past the city limits. Missions where you hit Vagos crack dens, ambush their drive-bys, or burn out their dealers show a crew that's less about culture and more about volume, more drugs, more guns, more bodies. They clash with Grove Street for obvious turf reasons, but they also go at it with Varios, because those same shipments and alleyways feed both neighborhoods. If you ain't sleeping, you start to notice how these Latino gangs quietly plug Los Santos into the rest of San Andreas. Vagos have links to desert drug labs and border-style smuggling routes that run through places like Tierra Robada and the Badlands. Aztecas, through Cesar and his contacts, end up brushing up against operations that reach toward Las Venturas, especially once CJ starts doing business with Woozy and the Triads. This would make a lot more sense in the context of the bigger criminal map. Street sets on the east side are basically the intake valve for product that's cooked in the desert and washed in casino money up north. In reality, by the time you get to Guitaví, the names have shifted, but the structure survived. Mexican cartels and Latino gangs are baked into modern Los Santos, from Trevor's deals with the Ortega brothers to the Madrazo connections and the Aztecas in Blaine County. It's believed that these are the spiritual descendants of guys like Cesar's crew and the old Vagos pipeline, still fighting over the same corridors, just with HD textures and way worse torture scenes. And once you see that, you can start tracking how every other organization in San Andreas either feeds off that pipeline or gets crushed trying. Grab some snacks. Because the next groups we're looking at don't just fight over corners, they buy entire towns. And once you zoom out from the cul-de-sac wars, you start seeing the people who don't care about cul-de-sacs at all. These are the guys who fly in, buy a warehouse, and suddenly every gun on the block is coming out of their shipping container. The Russian Mafia in San Andreas is a good example of that. You run into them in San Fierro and Las Venturas, and they're not posted on corners. They're sitting in back rooms. They handle arms deals, protection rackets, and quiet partnerships with whoever's useful that week. In reality, they function as mid-level suppliers. They move weapons and product in bulk, then let local gangs do the retail work and take the police heat. It's believed that outfits like this are the backbone of the whole state's black market. Because when Grove Street or the Vagos suddenly upgrade to military-grade hardware, somebody had to sign that invoice. Then you've got the San Fierro Triads, who basically treat crime like a Fortune 500 job. Wu Zi Mu, or Woozy, runs them as a disciplined, business-minded organization. On paper, they're into casinos and import-export shipping. Off the books, those same routes are perfect for smuggling, money laundering, and very targeted violence. Their base in Chinatown and their stake in the Four Dragons Casino show you a group that prefers contracts and ledgers over drive-bys, but will still put you in the bay if the spreadsheet says you're a liability. CJ's relationship with Woozy is where you really feel the ladder of the underworld. Before he meets Woozy, CJ is mostly dealing with neighborhood beef and small-time hustles. After that blind Triad boss decides he likes him, CJ suddenly has access to helicopters, inside information, and full-scale operations. The Caligula's casino heist is the best example, because it puts CJ and Woozy directly up against the Leone-connected mob. You go from jacking cars to running reconnaissance, planting bugs, and coordinating an Ocean's 11-style robbery on a mafia stronghold. It's also revealed that Woozy trusts CJ enough to hand over serious responsibility, which suggests that in another timeline, CJ ends up less like a gangbanger and more like a regional CEO of crime. Then, just when you think you've mapped it out, San Andreas throws in wildcards like the Da Nang boys. These Vietnamese gangsters are deep into smuggling and human trafficking, operating out of docks and freighters rather than street corners. Missions where you raid their ship or storm their pier expose a much darker layer, where people are just another commodity. If you ain't sleeping by this point, you start noticing how every new group escalates the stakes without ever really fixing anything. This would make a lot more sense in the context of the whole Jita ecosystem. San Andreas is basically a miniature version of it. Local street gangs fight at the bottom. International syndicates like the Russians, Triads, and the Nang boys run the middle, and old-school mafia or corporate interests sit at the top, buying influence. All of them collide in the same neighborhoods, which explains why one mission you're tagging walls, and the next you're sabotaging a casino for people who own private jets. And the scary part is, as we move into later games, those top layers only get richer and more protected. And the scary part is, as we move into later games, those top layers only get richer and more protected. You start to see a new kind of middleman pop up between the streets and the suits, the outlaw motorcycle club. If you ain't sleeping, grab some snacks, because this is a long one and the bikers are where things get weirdly personal. Outlaw motorcycle clubs in Jita are different from the colored up street sets or the old Italian families. They sell meth, run guns, and shake down local businesses. But they wrap all of it in this intense idea of brotherhood, patches, and loyalty. You're not just a soldier, you're a brother. And that patch on your back is believed to be worth more than money, girlfriends, or even your own safety. In reality, that brotherhood comes with a rigid hierarchy. You've got the national and chapter presidents at the top, then vice presidents, sergeants at arms, road captains, prospects at the bottom doing all the dirty work. Clubhouses act like mini embassies, bars, weapon stashes, and meeting rooms all in one, where votes are taken and enemies are listed on the wall next to the jukebox. It explains why, when you walk into a biker bar in Gita, everyone stops and stares. You're not just walking into a business, you're walking into their church. The most famous of these is the Lost Motorcycle Club. In Jita, Forfee, and its expansion The Lost and Damned, they're based around Alderney and Liberty City, led first by Billy Gray and then by Johnny Klebitz. Billy is the classic chaos president, fresh out of rehab, immediately diving back into hard drugs and pointless wars because he thinks violence is what keeps the club real. Johnny is the opposite. He's cautious, more business-minded, constantly trying to keep the club from imploding while still respecting the old biker code. During The Lost and Damned, you see how they actually operate. They hold meetings in the clubhouse, go on bike runs where the formation itself is treated like a ritual, and do arms deals under bridges and in abandoned lots. They also run protection rackets on local businesses, and it's also revealed that they're dipping further into meth. They have a rivalry with another biker gang, the Angels of Death, and they clash with Russian mobsters and other Liberty City factions, which suggests that even in a city full of mafias and cartels, the bikers still carve out their own ecosystem. The internal drama between Billy and Johnny mirrors the bigger theme of Das criminal history, old school identity versus new school money. Billy wants nonstop war and drugs. Johnny wants stability and profit, and the club gets ripped down the middle. This would make a lot more sense in the context of what happens later, when the Lost expand west. Because the Lost MC don't stay in Liberty. They eventually plant chapters in Blaine County and around Los Santos, drifting straight into Trevor Phillips' meth-soaked orbit. And that's where one club's reach and one bad friendship turns their proud brotherhood into a cautionary tale. So while the Lost are busy exporting their midlife crisis to Blaine County, Liberty City itself gets rebooted into something way colder. You go from the PS Terra comic book vibe to Geta, Ivy's Liberty, where the snow is gray, the sky is brown, and every crime boss looks like they filed their taxes. If you ain't sleeping, this is where the whole ecosystem quietly resets. In this new Liberty, the Italian Mafia is still around, but they're not the only show in town anymore. The game straight up suggests that the old Leone-style dominance has cracked, because now you've got Russians, Albanians, and all kinds of Eastern European outfits carving up the same streets. It's believed that this is Rockstar reflecting the real-world shift in New York, where old-school Cosa Nostra starts sharing the stage with post-Soviet crews, who don't really care about Omer, just numbers. On the Italian side, you mainly see four names. The Pegorino family is based out in Alderney, with Jimmy Pegorino acting like a guy who showed up late to a party that's already over. He wants that commission seat, but in reality everyone treats him like the weird cousin. Then you've got the Enchiladas, bigger and more established in Algonquin, the Pavanos, who are Jersey style and constantly beefing with Pegorino over docks and trucking, and the Messinas, who sit in the background as a more traditional old money family. The whole Pegorino, Pavano, Ancelotti web basically echoes the old Leone, Forelli, Sindacco triangle, just with better suits and worse prospects. At the same time, the real momentum is coming from the east. Mikhail Faustin's crew and broker is your introduction, a violent, chaotic Russian boss running a nightclub front, doing coke and starting wars just because he's bored. After Nico is forced to kill Faustin, Dmitry Roskolov steps in. Dmitry is calmer, more corporate, and it's also revealed that he's plugged into a larger Eastern European network with heroin deals, shipyards, and even offshore connections. He's the kind of guy who'll sell you out to Bulgarian and then act offended you didn't see it coming. Underneath that, you've got the Albanian loan sharks, guys like Dardan and Bledar, who start as small-time muscle in Hove Beach but represent a bigger pattern. Nico works for and against almost everyone. He does hits for Pegorino, kidnaps Ancelotti relatives, runs errands that put him in Pavano crossfire, and keeps getting pulled back into Russian drama. This would make a lot more sense in the context of how the game keeps throwing you between factions, because the missions are basically a tour of who's losing ground and who's quietly taking it. By the end, it's clear the Italians are fading. Pegorino's desperation, the infighting, the way Dmitry and Bulgarin treat them as expendable, all of it explains a broader Gita trend. As the timeline moves forward, the old families shrink while flexible, transnational groups with roots in post-Soviet chaos step up. Liberty City stops being a mob movie and starts feeling like a globalization horror story. And the scary part is, when you follow that thread across the map, you realize Liberty isn't the only city where the old guard is about to get replaced. And if you ain't sleeping yet, this is where you really see that old guard problem up close. Because sitting right on the edge of Liberty City, in Alderney, you've got Jimmy Pegorino trying to pretend it's still 1985. Jimmy Pegorino is the boss of the Pegorino family, a relatively small Alderney outfit that wants to be seen as a real commission family, but never quite makes it. He acts like a traditional Don, but the game keeps showing you he's insecure, touchy, and desperate for validation. It's believed that the commission barely even acknowledges him, which explains why he keeps ranting about respect and getting our seat at the table every time you see him. He's not a kingpin. He's the guy standing outside the club, yelling that his name should be on the list. Because of that chip on his shoulder, Pegorino starts reaching way above his weight. He pulls Nico Bellic into the family as muscle, using him for hits on rival organizations like the Pavanos and the Enchiladas during missions such as Pegorino's Pride. In reality, these aren't smart, calculated moves. They're loud stunts meant to impress people who still won't pick up his calls. It's also revealed that he's willing to jump into huge heroin deals tied to Ray Boccino and the Triads, even though the Pegorinos don't actually have the infrastructure to handle that level of business. The heroin job that spins out of control is basically the moment the universe tells Jimmy, you're punching way too high. Inside the family, you can feel that they're stretched thin. The Pegorinos have loyal but limited soldiers, guys who can shoot but don't have the numbers or brains of the bigger Liberty City families. Their capos, like Ray, are aging, shady, and constantly trying side deals because they know the ship is sinking. Missions around Alderney suggest they're always reacting, always one step behind the real power players. While the Gambettes and Enchiladas play politics, the Pegorinos are still doing clumsy drive-bys in industrial parks. That insecurity slowly curdles into paranoia. By the time you reach pest control, Jimmy is convinced Ray Boccino is a rat and sends Nico to clean him up, which wipes out one of the few semi-competent guys he had left. After that, he leans even harder on Nico for the final heroin decision with Dmitry Roskolov. This would make a lot more sense in the context of a stable family. Here it just shows Jimmy has burned every bridge except the most unstable ones. The ending drives the tragedy home. Whether you choose the deal or revenge, Pegorino's obsession with proving himself to the commission gets him isolated and exposed. On the deal path, his betrayal leads to Kate's death and his own final stand at the funfair and on Happiness Island. On the revenge path, he still ends up a hunted relic, gunned down by Nico with nobody left to protect him. Grab some snacks and look at it next to the Leone timeline. The Pegorinos are like a low-budget sequel, clinging to old-school honor while dabbling in modern heroin money, crushed between changing times, bigger syndicates, and Jimmy's ego. And once you see that pattern with them, you start spotting other almost families all over the HD era. And if the Pegorinos are a low-budget sequel, the real reboot of Liberty City's underworld is happening in Broker and Bohan, not Alderney. If you ain't sleeping, grab some snacks, because this is a long one, and the Italians are about to get pushed off their own poster. Mikhail Faustin is basically what happens when you give a Cold War PTSD case, a nightclub, and a crate of assault rifles. He runs a volatile Russian crew out of places like Perestroika and his mansion in Beachgate, doing drugs, extortion, gun running, and using the clubs as fronts. Nico gets pulled into this world through Roman, because Roman's gambling and taxi business bring him into contact with Faustin's people, especially Vlad. It's believed that Faustin used to be more calculated, but by the time you meet him, he's snorting coke, executing people on a whim, and picking fights with the Italians and the Albanians for fun. That instability is exactly what sets up the next guy. Dmitry Roskolov is introduced as Faustin's calmer underboss, the one who apologizes after Mikhail randomly shoots a man in a club. That contrast explains a lot. Dmitry represents a new kind of criminal in the HD era. He's pragmatic, treacherous, and globally connected. During the story, it's revealed that he's willing to sell out Faustin to the Russians' old partners, sacrifice Nico to Ray Boccino's heroin deal, and then flip again to work with Bulgarian and even shadowy buyers in Europe. He doesn't care about family, oaths, or flags. He cares about staying alive and staying rich. This would make a lot more sense in the context of how real post-Soviet mobs evolved, turning into loose networks that move drugs, guns, and people across borders instead of sitting in one neighborhood like an old-school family. Around them you've got the Albanians and smaller Eastern European outfits, and these guys are nasty in a very focused way. The Albanian loan sharks who hassle Roman and Hove Beach specialize in debt collection and street-level intimidation. Other crews, like the guys tied to the sex trafficking rings Nico hits in Bohan, control specific pipelines of human trafficking and protection rackets in immigrant blocks. They don't have the grand hierarchy of the Leones or the Pegorinos. In reality, they feel more like cells, cousins, friends from the same village, a couple of ex-soldiers, all bonded by language and desperation. The big difference is how they operate. These networks are less concerned with tradition and more with efficiency and brutality. If someone owes, they get stomped. If someone talks, they disappear. Nico is constantly treated as a disposable asset in their feuds, sent to clean up messes between Faustin and Dimitri, between Russians and Albanians, between local cliques and foreign suppliers. You're never really in the family. You're just useful until you're not. And if you ain't sleeping yet, that shift toward flexible network crime doesn't stop in Liberty City. It also revealed itself later in Los Santos, where cartels, private security firms like Merryweather, and even your own Jita online organization blur the line between gang and corporation, which is where this whole timeline is quietly heading next. And if you ain't sleeping yet, grab some snacks, because Liberty City gives you one of the clearest looks at a gang trying to be a business and a family at the same time: the Lost MC. You mostly see them through Johnny Klebitz. Johnny is the acting president, the guy who kept the books balanced and the wars contained, while Billy Gray was in rehab. Billy is the official president, but he's also a walking disaster, full-blown addict, ego through the roof, obsessed with chaos and image. The second he gets out, he drags the club back into hard heroin deals, old beefs and suicidal alliances that Johnny had just spent months untangling. On paper, the Lost MC is a pretty standard outlaw biker outfit. They run meth and heroin across Alderney and Liberty State, using their bikes as rolling distribution and their vans for bulk. It's also revealed that they're into gun running, moving stolen military hardware and black market pistols between small gangs and foreign buyers. Their clubhouses, like the one in Alderney, double as bars, crash pads, and war rooms. Guys are playing pool and watching TV in the same room where they plan ambushes and count drug money. Which really explains how blurred the line is between hanging out with the boys and committing federal crimes. Their main business problem is competition. The Angels of Death are the rival biker gang, and missions like Action Reaction show how fast tit-for-tat violence turns into full-scale war. Billy wants to send a message, so you torch their bikes and hit their hangouts. They come back harder, bodies pile up, and suddenly this isn't just about territory. It's about pride. At the same time, Johnny is forced into bad heroin deals with guys like the Triads and connected Russians. And this shit's cursed suggests the product is literally bloodstained, stolen, and already promised to somebody much scarier. Inside the club, it's believed that loyalty is everything, but the Lost is rotting from within. Billy cuts side deals, snitches line up with the feds, and internal traders treat the patches like jerseys they can swap when the score changes. During all this, Johnny is trying to keep some kind of code alive. No dealing to kids. No pointless civilian casualties. At least pretend the Brotherhood means something. But Liberty City is shifting toward bigger cartels, Eastern European syndicates, and corporate crime, and you're watching a biker gang that can't scale up without losing its soul. This would make a lot more sense in the context of what happens later. After Liberty City, fragments of the Lost MC expand to Blaine County, chasing cheaper meth, less heat, and a fresh start. In reality, all they do is wander straight into Trevor Phillips' backyard and the modern meth economy he's building. And that fresh start is about to turn into one of the most one-sided gang wars in Jita history. And while the Lost are getting chewed up out in Blaine County, Liberty City quietly upgrades crime into something shinier. Less meth lab. More bottle service. This is where Tony Prince comes in. Tony Prince, better known as Gay Tony, is a Liberty City nightclub impresario who looks legit on paper. He owns Maisonette 9 and Hercules. He knows every socialite, and he's the guy you'd see on a billboard, not a wanted poster. But the clubs are drowning in debt, and it's believed that almost every light bulb in those places is paid for with mob money. Ancelotti capos keep him afloat, Russian gangsters circle his loans like sharks, and corrupt financiers use his VIP booths as unofficial boardrooms because nobody records meetings over champagne showers. Luis Lopez is the reason Tony isn't already at the bottom of the Humboldt. Luis is Tony's bodyguard, business partner, and full-time firefighter for every bad decision Tony ever made. During the Ballad of Gay Tony, Luis is juggling deals with guys like Yusuf Amir, a rich Emirati playboy who treats Liberty City like his personal Lego set, while also dealing with cartel-connected suppliers and the city's coked-up elite. Luis grew up around street crime and Dominican crews, so he can talk to gangbangers in the projects and hedge fund guys in the VIP the same night, which explains why he becomes the bridge between high society and the actual underworld. The clubs themselves are the real criminal innovation. On the surface, they're just nightlife. In reality, they're money laundering machines. Cash pours in from cover charges, bottle service, and fake attendance numbers, and it's also revealed that dirty money from drugs, extortion, and stolen diamonds gets washed through Tony's books. Dealers move product in bathroom stalls, back offices double as drop spots, and the dance floor is basically linked in for criminals. You're not fighting over corners anymore. You're fighting over who controls the guest list. The diamond storyline is where you see how tangled Liberty City really is. One set of diamonds passes through the hands of the Jewish mob, the Ancelottis, the Lost MC, street-level stick-up kids like Johnny's crew, and then Luis, all in overlapping missions. What looks like a simple heist from one protagonist's angle is, in reality, 5 different organizations colliding over a single asset. This would make a lot more sense in the context of how Rockstar wants you to feel like a small piece in a huge machine. You think you're doing a one-off job? You're actually stepping on half the city's toes. Pattern interrupt here. Those rope lines outside Maisonette 9? That's the new gang turf. Because when you jump to GTA V and online, that model scales up. Nightclubs in Los Santos become passive income empires and laundering hubs. Casinos like the Diamond are basically sanitized mob fronts, and corporations and shell companies start to matter more than which color bandana you wear. If you ain't sleeping, grab some snacks, because the next era is where spreadsheets become just as dangerous as shotguns. And that's exactly where GTA V's Los Santos picks up. A place where the color of your crew still matters, but the guy who really owns the block probably did it through a hedge fund. You go from cul-de-sacs with green and purple flags to a skyline paid for with mortgage fraud, movie money, and off-book government contracts. Los Santos in V is a modern metropolis, and it's revealed that the old San Andreas gang map didn't disappear, it just got squeezed. The families and the Ballas are still at it, but they're fighting over shrinking corners while freeways, stadiums, and luxury condos carve up what used to be turf. In reality, most of the real cash is moving through real estate deals, celebrity endorsements, and tech IPOs, but guys on Grove Street are still dying over which color bandana you wear. The families are now split into smaller sets, which explains why they feel disorganized when you first meet Franklin. You've got the Chamberlain gangster families down by Strawberry, the Forum Drive sets, the Carson Avenue guys, all technically on the same side but constantly arguing about respect and who's putting in work. It's believed that these splits are Rockstar's way of showing how the old Grove Street unity collapsed during the HD era. Because when the city got richer, the gang members didn't. On the other side, the Ballas are still purple, still petty, but a lot more embedded into the new Los Santos. They hang around places like Davis and Rancho, and you see them posted near construction sites and clubs, suggesting they're tied into security, small-time dealing, and maybe even fronting for bigger suppliers. The feud with the families is now just one layer in a city, where both sides are basically subcontractors in someone else's supply chain. Above them sits the Madrazo Cartel. Martin Madrazo is introduced as this calm, suburban cartel boss who lives behind a gate in Vinewood Hills. But he's one of the most dangerous people in the game. He's involved in kidnappings, assassinations, and high-level drug trafficking. And it's also revealed that even the Fib treats him carefully. Martin doesn't need to spray tags on walls. He has lawyers, hitmen, and cousins like Javier doing the dirty work while he hosts barbecues. Then you've got the corporate and quasi-legal outfits. Devin Weston's whole operation is basically a white-collar gang, using shell companies, private jets, and political connections to steal cars, crush unions, and manipulate the movie industry. Merryweather Security is a private army with government contracts, moving weapons, doing illegal detentions, and running offshore black ops as if it's just another business service. This would make a lot more sense in the context of our three protagonists, because Gita V's story is all about Franklin, Michael, and Trevor bouncing between these worlds. One mission you're in a cul-de-sac shootout with Ballas. The next you're robbing a Union depository vault, or doing a covert raid with Fib agents and Merryweather helicopters overhead. If you ain't sleeping, grab some snacks, because the next parts dive into how each of these three plugs into this food chain and starts rewiring who really runs Los Santos. So when we zoom in from that giant food chain to street level, you land right back on Grove Street, except it doesn't really exist anymore. In Gita V, the old Grove Street families have splintered, rebranded, and moved a few blocks over, which already explains a lot about why they're losing. The families aren't one solid green wall now. You've got Chamberlain gangster families around Covenant Avenue, Forum Drive families over in Strawberry, Davis neighborhood families holding their own pockets, each with its own shot callers and petty beefs. One set won't ride with another because of some old disrespect, a dead cousin, or a rumor about who's secretly talking to the Ballas. It's believed that this fragmentation is why you almost never see a united push against purple like you did back in San Andreas. Everyone's checking who's on the t-shirt before they check who's across the street. On the other side, the Ballas have actually adapted. In reality, they feel like a street gang that read a business book. They've still got the cul-de-sac soldiers, but behind that, you've got more organized drug distribution, tighter links to outside suppliers, and a clear sense that somebody up the chain is thinking long-term. Dialogue during random encounters suggests they're plugged into Mexican and possibly offshore connections, moving coke and meth in bulk while the families argue over who controls a single block. They're also willing to use social and economic leverage, leaning on local businesses, using intimidation to control housing projects, and treating violence as one tool in a bigger toolkit instead of the whole job. Franklin Clinton is stuck right in the middle of this evolution. Franklin is a young hustler from Forum Drive families who's trying to age out of small-time gangbanging, but he's constantly pulled back by Lamar, by his aunt's house, by the expectations of his set. Every time he tries to move up through Simeon, Michael, or Lester, someone from the old life calls his phone, needs backup, or wants him at a backyard barbecue that turns into a drive-by. This would make a lot more sense in the context of how Los Santos treats people like Franklin. Your gang identity is basically your resume, your credit score, and your criminal record all rolled into one. Hood Safari is the perfect snapshot. You, Franklin, Lamar, and Trevor roll up to a Ballas deal in the projects, trying to level up from nickel and dime to something bigger. It's also revealed that Lamar has totally misread the situation. The Ballas set them up, and you get that classic San Andreas pattern: drug deal gone wrong, ambush from the rooftops, cops swarming, and a chaotic escape through backyards. The city around you has moved on to corporate fraud, Fib black ops, and private armies like Merryweather. But these guys are still dying over who gets to sell low-grade product on a corner. If you ain't sleeping, grab some snacks. Because the sad joke is that, on the ground, this family's bias feud feels world-shaking, but in the grand scheme of Los Santos' power, it's just one noisy layer in a much taller criminal pyramid. And the really uncomfortable part is who's quietly stacking cash on the layers above them. And sitting one layer up that pyramid, out in the desert where the billboards are sunburnt and the dreams are cheaper, you get Trevor Phillips Industries. TPI isn't a family or a club in any formal sense. It's basically one man's untreated issues weaponized into a business plan. From a trailer in Sandy Shores, Trevor runs meth labs, small-scale gun running, and whatever random contract work Ron can panic deal into existence. On paper, it shouldn't work. The structure is loose, the employees are terrified, and the CEO is the kind of guy who solves HR disputes with a wrench. But in reality, that's exactly why it works in Blaine County. Everyone out there is already half broken. So a boss who's more dangerous than the cops, the bikers, and the cartels combined actually gives TPI a weird kind of stability. People pay on time because they've seen what happens when you don't. You first see that in Mr. Phillips when Trevor finds out Michael is alive because of a TV news report, snaps, and immediately takes it out on the Lost MC. The Lost used to treat Blaine County as their backyard. After Trevor, it's a graveyard. He wipes out a whole chapter in one night, kills Johnny Klebitz in a drug-fueled meltdown, and burns their trailer park, which explains why the surviving bikers spend the rest of the game acting like a traumatized ex. Then he goes after the O'Neill brothers, these backwoods meth entrepreneurs who are trying to cut a deal with the Los Santos meth buyers behind Trevor's back. That farmhouse shootout in Crystal Maze, where Trevor burns their lab and chases them through the woods, is business and therapy at the same time. It's also revealed that Trevor's rage is tied into his own feelings of betrayal by Michael. So any competitor looks like another person trying to replace him. The result is that TPI expands its meth territory, mostly because Trevor refuses to share the sandbox. Around the edges, you've got the local smugglers and Ron's conspiracy brain contacts. Trevor muscles into air runs and gun drops, turning TPI into a discount arms dealer. But the real tension kicks in when he bumps into bigger players. His partnership with the Aztecas, especially Ortega, is basically a hostage situation pretending to be a business relationship, and one bad mood swing is enough to push it into open war. Then there's the Madrazo Cartel. Kidnapping Patricia Madrazo drags TPI into a league it can't actually compete in. And it's believed that if Michael didn't help smooth things over, Trevor's entire operation would have quietly vanished in a mass grave outside Los Santos. This would make a lot more sense in the context of how cartels treat small-time cooks as disposable. If you ain't sleeping, grab some snacks. Because TPI is also the bridge between old-school biker meth culture and the new era of cartel logistics and corporate drug money. Trevor is what happens when a dying subculture refuses to go quietly. And the next organizations we hit are the ones that don't rely on one unstable guy in a trailer, but on spreadsheets, private armies, and government contracts. And while Trevor is screaming in the desert, up in the hills you've got a guy who barely raises his voice and still scares everybody. Martin Madrazo is a cartel boss hiding in plain sight, living in Vinewood Hills with a tennis court, a nice view, and a reputation that makes federal agents tread lightly. He presents as a respectable businessman. He's got the polo shirts, the tasteful art, the charity donor vibe. But in reality, this is a man who runs kidnappings, assassinations, and drug operations while serving you wine on the patio. It's believed that his money comes from old-school cartel routes across the border, laundered through property, construction, and whatever shell companies his lawyers can dream up. When you first meet him after Michael tears down that tennis coach's house, he doesn't shout or pull a gun. He just calmly explains what you did and what it cost him. That scene is your first lesson in how Madrazo's power actually works. One mistake, one wrecked mansion, and suddenly, Michael's family is hiding in a motel, because this businessman is about to have them all killed. A single phone call from Martin suggests judges can be leaned on, cops can look away, and people can vanish. You never see him leading soldiers into the street like a gang boss. You see him sitting at home, and other people do the ugly part. His organization is built for that kind of distance. Madrazo keeps armed enforcers around the estate, guys like Ortega's crew getting pushed around as examples, and then behind them he has lawyers and corrupt officials who keep his name off any paperwork. It's also revealed that he has deep ties to Mexican cartels across the border, which makes him less of a standalone gang leader and more of a hub in a much bigger machine. If you ain't sleeping, grab some snacks, because this is a long one when you start connecting who benefits from his shipments, his intel, and his favors. Missions like Caida Libre really explain his style. Instead of sending his own men to kill an informant, he has Michael and Trevor shoot down an entire plane with a sniper rifle and a modified antenna tower. They take all the risk, they chase the wreck, they get covered in dirt. Madrazo stays in his house, keeps plausible deniability, and if it all goes wrong, he can just say, "Some crazy guys did that, not me." This would make a lot more sense in the context of modern cartels using contractors, freelancers, and cutouts instead of wearing colors on a street corner. So while the families are beefing in South Los Santos, and TPI is blowing up trailers for fun, Martin Madrazo is playing a different game entirely. His violence is quiet, his money is clean on paper, and his reach is long. And as you move into outfits like Merryweather and the Fib, you start to see how that same quiet power scales up when it's backed by governments and private armies instead of just one man in the hills. Merryweather is what you get when Madrazo's quiet power gets a corporate logo and a customer support line. On paper, it's just a private military company with contracts all over the world. In reality, you're looking at a roaming mercenary army with ships, jets, attack choppers, and guys in body armor who show up to a dock in Los Santos like it's Fallujah. Merryweather Security is introduced as legit because they guard freighters, offshore rigs, and government cargo, but the game keeps showing you how thin that line is. During the mission where Trevor hijacks the cargo plane, it's revealed that Merryweather is moving experimental weapons and hardware through Blaine County airspace, and nobody in authority really cares as long as the paperwork looks clean. The freighter in the port of Los Santos is the same deal. It suggests that half their business is just high-end gun running with better branding. You see it again when they respond to you stealing from them. Normal companies send lawyers. Merryweather sends buzzards and gunboats. They're also happy to operate on U.S. soil, doing black ops that are supposed to be overseas only. The rail yard, the offshore salvage, the convoy hits, all imply this isn't a few bad apples. This is the business model. And if you ain't sleeping yet, grab some snacks, because the government side is somehow worse. The Fib is Jita's FBI analog, but it acts more like a rival gang with badges. Steve Haynes and Dave Norton are supposed to be agents, yet they use Michael, Franklin, and Trevor as disposable muscle in their internal turf war with the rival agency, the IA. They don't build cases. They stage heists. They don't gather intel. They torture random guys on golf carts. By the Book is the clearest example. Trevor is forced to torture Aziz because the Fib wants a name, even though the cutscene quietly suggests they already know who they're after and just need a justification. Michael then assassinates the target at the Del Perro Pier, not for justice, but to make Haynes look good on TV. It's believed that this whole sequence is less about national security and more about career advancement and budget battles. The Merryweather heists work the same way. When you raid the freighter or the offshore device, Lester explains that the Fib wants the tech so they can one-up the IA, not stop some looming threat. Your crew does all the dirty work, while the agency walks off with the prize and total legal cover. Traditional gangs like the Families or Vagos could never dream of this kind of protection. If a Ballas set tried half of this, they'd be on Weasel News every night. So when you look at Los Santos' criminal ladder, you start to wonder who's really on top. Is it Madrazo, the cartels, the street gangs, or the state-backed crime syndicates with infinite budgets and zero accountability? The game starts answering that when you see who gets away with what next. The game starts answering that when you see who actually signs the checks. Because on top of that ladder, you don't just have gang bosses, you've got Devin Weston. Devin Weston is a venture capitalist and billionaire who basically speedruns every kind of corporate crime you can think of, while still getting invited to charity dinners. He owns chunks of everything through shell companies, from Merryweather stock to car manufacturers, and he uses that to squeeze people. It's revealed that he bankrolls Michael's movie dream, just so he can sabotage the Richards' majestic deal and profit off the chaos. When Solomon and Michael won't play along, Devin doesn't send lawyers first. He sends armed goons to kidnap the producer and burn the studio's future. You see how he operates during missions like I Fought the Law and Eye in the Sky. Michael and Franklin steal high-end cars, not as random boosts, but as part of Devin's plan to corner the luxury auto market and screw over rival executives and government contracts. He hides behind contracts and NDAs, then casually orders a hit on the entire O'Neill family, and later on, Michael's family. Like it's just another line item in a quarterly report. In reality, he's running a cartel made of accountants and mercenaries. But Devin isn't the only one. Life Invader is GTA's parody of social media giants. And it might be even darker, because it never has to pull a gun. Jay Norris sells it as this fun, open platform, while the in-game websites and radio chatter quietly spell out that they're hoarding user data, tracking people, and selling everything to advertisers, and probably the government. The office is full of overworked hipsters, but the actual product is mass surveillance. This would make a lot more sense in the context of real tech scandals, and Rockstar leans into that. Michael's mission friend request is the perfect example. You infiltrate Life Invader, plant a bomb in a prototype phone, and literally blow Norris's head off live on TV. The game plays it as a joke, but what you're really doing is corporate assassination triggered by a single investor, Lester, who then manipulates the stock market around it. When Franklin does Lester's assassination missions, you're wiping out CEOs, sabotaging pharmaceutical companies, hotel chains, and tech firms, all to rig the BOSAC and LCN exchanges. If you ain't sleeping, you can actually watch your portfolio spike right after each kill. Compared to that, a Ballas drive-by looks like pocket change. These white-collar hits move billions, shift entire industries, and nobody calls it a gang war. It's just the market. The elite treat it as business as usual, while the only people who go to prison are the ones without a board of directors. Then GTA Online lets you become a mini Devin Weston yourself. You buy import-export warehouses, counterfeit cash factories, nightclubs, arcades, even legit offices. On paper, it's entrepreneurship. In reality, every single one is a front for smuggling, money laundering, and fraud. The game quietly teaches you the same lesson Devin lives by. The real upgrade isn't better guns, it's better paperwork. Pattern interrupt for you. At some point you stop asking which gangs run Los Santos and start asking which spreadsheets do. And the next groups we're about to get into make that question even messier. At some point those spreadsheets stop belonging to Devin Weston and start belonging to you. If you ain't sleeping, grab some snacks, because this is a long one and this is where GTA's criminal hierarchy quietly flips upside down. In GTA Online you spawn in as a nobody. You're basically Franklin without the charm or the friends, doing simian repo work and Gerald drug runs, picking up pocket change while real organizations like the Madrazo Cartel and Merryweather look untouchable. But the game very quickly starts handing you paperwork. First, you become a CEO with an office in Maze Bank, then an MC president, then a nightclub owner, and in reality you're replacing entire gangs and cartels with one silent, hyper-efficient player empire. The types of organizations you can run explain how insane that shift is. You've got biker clubs that make the Lost MC look like a cosplay group, cocaine and meth labs that outscale the O'Neill brothers in a weekend, and gun-running bunkers that turn you into a private arms dealer on par with Merryweather's black-budget contracts. It's also revealed that you can stack import/export warehouses, counterfeiting operations, weed farms, and document forgery on top, all managed from a single laptop like you're doing taxes instead of international crime. Then, Rockstar leans into the absurdity. Nightclubs that launder money while Solomon plays, arcades that front for the Diamond Casino heist, even a submarine-based smuggling ring run out of a stolen Russian sub. This would make a lot more sense in the context of a James Bond villain, but GTA just lets you quietly become the guy every other faction should be terrified of. One character, no fixed face, technically just the player, ends up with more diversified revenue streams than any story mode boss we've talked about. Because of that, NPC organizations start to get reclassified around you. The Madrazo Cartel goes from terrifying off-screen boogeyman in single player to Martin texting you like a needy freelance client. Merryweather shifts from paramilitary nightmare to a service you can literally call on your phone or rob during missions. The Duggan family rolls into town as the new Texas money trying to own the Diamond Casino, but your crew turns their security staff, their mercenaries, and their vault into a repeatable side hustle. The meta lore implication is pretty simple. In the online timeline, the real rulers of Los Santos and Blaine County are anonymous player-controlled syndicates. It's believed that by the time all the DLCs stack up, these player empires collectively outgun any combination of families, Ballas, Madrazos, and fib cutouts. The city is technically run by corporations and agencies, but functionally it's run by people alt-tabbing between heists. And the funniest part is watching the official factions try to fight that. The Duggans fortify the Diamond, the casino staff and Agatha Baker scramble to play both sides, and remnants of older groups keep popping up as mission fodder. They all try to hold on to territory that, in reality, you're farming for ARP. We'll break down those online era outfits next, and how each one fails, or barely survives, in a world where the real crime bosses log off when they're tired. And one of the funniest victims of that mission fodder era is a crew that used to be headliners. The Lost MC go from starring in their own DLC to getting farmed for ARP outside a meth lab. If you ain't sleeping yet, this is where it gets kind of brutal. The Lost Motorcycle Club you meet in Blaine County in GTA V is basically the Liberty City story, limping west. After the Lost and Damned, it's believed that Billy Gray's implosion and the Alderney Civil War forced surviving members to scatter, so a San Andreas chapter led by Johnny Klebitz tries to rebuild in the desert, away from the Liberty City mob and away from the LCPD. You see their trailers around Stab City. You hear Ron talking about them on the radio scanner. And it's also revealed that Johnny is still technically the voice of reason, trying to hold a club together that's already bleeding members to meth and bad leadership. Then Trevor Phillips walks in. Their conflict with Trevor starts small, a turf issue, some drug territory, and Trevor sleeping with Ashley Butler, who's basically the human embodiment of do not touch. Your life will get worse. Because Johnny is older, tired, and already broken by years of drama, he confronts Trevor in front of Licorice. That scene where Trevor smashes his face in isn't just shock value, it explains the power shift. The biker who once stood up to Billy Gray gets killed in the dirt outside a liquor store, and after that Trevor personally leads a massacre at the Lost Camp, burning bikes, blowing up trailers, and chasing survivors off cliffs. In one mission, the Lost MC lose their president, their main base, and their narrative relevance. After that, they're basically background dressing in single player, popping up as angry bikers you mowed down on the highway or in random shootouts. This would make a lot more sense in the context of GTA Online, where Rockstar keeps them around, but only as content. Online turns the Lost into a permanent, respawning enemy faction. You raid Lost Labs during contact missions, jack their vans for Trevor, and later, when you run your own MC or CEO empire, you're constantly stealing their product, wiping out their chapters, and farming their spawns during free roam events. In reality, they exist so your clubhouse has someone to bully. Even the Lost Contract update has you dismantling more of their operations so other NPCs, and by extension you, can move in. The irony is pretty dark. A gang that once got its own expansion, full of internal politics and loyalty drama, is reduced to disposable AI with predictable routes and bad aim. It suggests how the GTA world treats anyone who can't scale up from local gang to cartel, corporation, or player-run empire. The Lost MC become a case study in what happens when you don't adapt to a world of Duggins, Madrazos, Merryweather, and players logging in with flying bikes. And if a whole biker nation can get downgraded to cannon fodder, what do you think happens to the smaller, older crews we haven't talked about yet? And that brings you to the exact opposite end of the spectrum. If the Lost MC are a failing corporation, the O'Neill brothers are the kind of family business you'd cross the street to avoid, even if that street is just a dirt track in Blaine County. The O'Neills are a backwoods clan running a meth operation out of Grapeseed, and everything about them screams insular, inbred loyalty. They live together, cook together, and threaten the entire county together. Their farmhouse doubles as Q, lab, and family home, and it's believed that half of Blaine County either buys from them or keeps quiet because they don't want to end up buried under a wind turbine. They're not just cooking for locals either. They're trying to punch above their weight with outside buyers, especially the Chinese Triads rolling with Dao Chang and Wei Chang's organization. Trevor Phillips Industries is their direct rival, and this is where it starts to go bad for them. Trevor and the O'Neills are competing for the same meth contracts and the same dusty territory, and Ron's radio chatter suggests Trevor actually had a shot at locking down the Chinese deal. During the mission where you visit the O'Neill place, it's also revealed that the brothers tried to cut Trevor out and underbid him to the Triads. That one bad decision turns a business rivalry into a personal war. You then see how Trevor responds to being undercut. He storms the farmhouse, wipes out most of the brothers, and burns the entire lab to the ground while they scream in the distance. In reality, this is Rockstar, showing you what happens when a loud but small-time crew collides with someone who's willing to escalate way past rural intimidation. It's a hostile takeover, just without the lawyers. Their business model was simple but profitable before Trevor showed up. Multiple small meth labs instead of one giant super lab, family members acting as soldiers and cooks, and a reputation for sudden violence doing the work that lawyers and shell companies do for bigger organizations. They don't have offshore accounts or corporate fronts like the Duggins. They have shotguns, pickup trucks, and a very relaxed attitude toward OSHA regulations. But crews like the O'Neills are a dying breed. GTA Online quietly explains this, because once players start running bunker operations, nightclub drug hubs, and full-on pharmaceutical scale meth labs, a few barns in Grapeseed don't stand a chance. The same economy that crushes the Lost MC also erases these old-school, rural families. If you ain't sleeping yet, grab some snacks, because this would make a lot more sense in the context of the wider series. GTA has always had these regional or rural gangs in the background. You had the redneck gangs and hillbilly meth cooks in San Andreas up in the countryside, the small-town mafiosi and farm-based outfits around Alderney and upstate Liberty City, and even the creepy desert weirdos in Blaine County that feel like spiritual cousins to the O'Neills. Not every criminal organization is sitting in a skyscraper office. Some of them are sitting on a porch, drunk at noon, holding a shotgun and a very fragile local empire that's about to get swallowed by something much bigger. And once the rural families start fading out, you can finally zoom out and see who's really inheriting their territory in the HD era. And once the rural families fade out, you zoom out and see who's really inheriting their territory in the HD era. It's not just another trailer park clan. It's people who own oil fields, private jets, and senators. In reality, the next wave of gangsters in San Andreas are wearing golf shoes and signing NDAs. The Duggan family is that wave. They're a wealthy Texan oil dynasty that treats Los Santos like a side project, and the Diamond Casino and Resort is just another asset on a spreadsheet they want to flip. Avery Duggan shows up as the face of it, a classic loud Texan investor, and it's revealed that he's trying a hostile takeover of the casino using every tool he has: lawyers, lobbyists, and guys with assault rifles who don't ask questions. On paper, the Duggans are a legitimate energy and real estate empire. In practice, the way they move on the diamond looks exactly like a mob war with better branding. They bribe city officials, they lean on regulators, they weaponize permits and zoning, and when that doesn't work, they send mercenaries to storm the building. The game basically suggests that the only difference between a cartel and a conglomerate is whether the boardroom has a gun rack. You get pulled into this because Tao Cheng and Agatha Baker are desperately trying to hold on to the casino. Tao is the chaotic heir to the Cheng Triad interests in San Andreas, and Agatha is the very stressed general manager who actually cares about keeping the lights on. Working with them, you start hitting back at the Duggans with sabotage, heists, and targeted attacks on their supply lines. So instead of a turf war over a block, you're doing a private shadow war over a luxury resort on the Vinewood Sign's doorstep. During the Diamond Casino story, you raid Duggan-owned ranches, torch their equipment, steal their intel, and eventually rob the very building they're trying to buy, just to wreck their leverage. This would make a lot more sense in the context of how Avery operates in Vice City stories, because it's believed that he's always mixed legit deals with very violent problem solving. He'll talk about shareholder value while you're literally blowing up his trucks. The security they bring in is another big tell. The Duggans use Merryweather-style private military forces, guys in tactical gear with helicopters and armored SUVs, which explains how old money stays on top in GTA's modern era. You're not just fighting goons from a local gang, you're fighting a corporate army that bills by the hour. If you ain't sleeping, grab some snacks, because this is a long one in terms of what it says about power. White-collar crime at the top, paramilitary in the middle, and street crews at the bottom getting crushed. By the end of the Diamond arc, the Duggan storyline basically sums up GTA Online's whole theme: players versus entrenched elites. The battlefield isn't a cul-de-sac in Grove Street anymore. It's casinos, resorts, and skyline properties. And whoever controls those controls the criminal ecosystem we're about to see evolve even further. And this is where Rockstar quietly flips the whole food chain. After the Duggans and the old money elites, GTA Online basically looks at you and goes, "Alright, you run it then." Motorcycle clubs are the first big step. You're not just some prospect hanging around the lost trailer park anymore. You become an MC president, slap a name on your patch, and suddenly you're running cocaine lockups, meth labs, weed farms, document forgeries, and counterfeit cash factories out of random sheds and warehouses. It's believed that this is Rockstar's way of showing the lost MC getting edged out by a million tiny, player-run clubs, all doing the same business, but with less loyalty and way more oppressor EMIC-2 insurance claims. In reality, the MC system lets you roleplay the exact thing Trevor and Johnny Klebitz were fighting over. You recruit friends as prospects and road captains. You call out contracts on the open road, and you defend your product when raids hit at the worst possible time. Usually right after someone says they're logging off. The game straight up explains that your coke lockup is competing with other outfits in Blaine County, which quietly suggests that the Lost's whole niche has been carved up by people like you who showed up with better guns and a faster refresh timer. Then you've got CEOs and VIPs. This is the corporate version of a gang. You buy a maze bank office, hire associates, and start moving special cargo through warehouses that look suspiciously like Simeon's worst nightmares. After that, the import-export update turns you into a high-end car thief, boosting supercars, stashing them in vehicle warehouses, and laundering them through fake buyers. It's also revealed that once gun running drops, a lot of those same CEOs dig underground, literally, buying bunkers to manufacture illegal weapons. These bunkers are basically private Merryweather factories with worse HR. Nightclubs are where it all ties together. On the surface, you're a totally legitimate club owner, booking DJs and watching drunk NPCs fall over on the dance floor. Underneath, your nightclub warehouse quietly launders money and passively fills up with product from your other businesses. Coke, meth, cargo, guns, even your bunker stock. If you ain't sleeping, you can sit in the office, watch the safe fill up, and pretend you're some respectable Las Venturas mogul, while your technicians move crates you never touched. All of this gives you a taste of running a full syndicate. You manage supply chains, resupply labs, schedule sell missions, and defend your properties during raids. You ping the whole lobby to escort a truck. You call in air support. You argue about who crashed the delivery plane. This would make a lot more sense in the context of a normal Mo guild, but here it's wrapped in Guetta's idea of capitalism as organized crime. Lore-wise, it suggests something important. In universe, the old centralized gangs and cartels are getting drowned by this chaotic swarm of player organizations, each one a tiny cartel with its own office, bunker, MC, and nightclub. The underworld stops being a pyramid and turns into a storm. And the next evolution of that storm is what really breaks the timeline of who owns Los Santos. And the point where that storm really goes off the rails is when the people who are supposed to control crime just start doing it better than anyone else. If you ain't sleeping, this is where Yeta Online quietly turns the government agency label into just another gang tag with a flag on it. The IA is basically TA's CIA. On paper, they're the clean-cut intelligence guys, but every time you meet them in online, they're acting like a cartel with better stationery. During the Doomsday Heist setup, an IA contact drags your organization into national security work, which sounds heroic until you realize you're breaking into data centers, stealing drives, and murdering witnesses, all while he sits in an office and calls it patriotism. It's also revealed that half the time the IA and the FIB are fighting each other harder than they fight any actual terrorist group. That feud is what opens the door for the Doomsday storyline. A rogue tech billionaire, Avon Hertz, and his pet AI, Clifford. Avon is this socially awkward, doomsday prepping tech bro who believes everyone is out to get him, so he builds a private army and a superintelligence to save the world. In reality, he just wants to be the only one left running it. Because the agencies are too busy backstabbing each other, your little CEO outfit or MC club suddenly becomes a major player in a shadow war. You're raiding hidden facilities in the middle of the Alamo Sea, infiltrating a missile silo under Mount Chiliad, and storming an offshore submarine that looks like Merryweather's wet dream. The game basically promotes you from mid-level drug runner to someone who decides whether or not global thermonuclear war happens tonight. Mission by mission, you start doing exactly what Merryweather and the FIB do in story mode. You kidnap enemy scientists, steal classified weapons, and wipe out entire squads of heavily armed operatives in parking garages and underground bunkers. 1 minute, you're hacking servers in a secret IA base under a normal government building. The next you're dogfighting jetpacks over a missile launch, like San Andreas roleplay accidentally turned into Metal Gear. This would make a lot more sense in the context of a straight military game, but Ta plays it deadpan. The IAA and their rivals talk about controlling narratives and stabilizing markets, which in practice means rigging stocks, staging false flag attacks, and deciding which corrupt billionaire lives or dies. It's believed that half the disasters you stop were created by the same people paying you to stop them. They're not stopping crime, they're monopolizing it. And that's the uncomfortable punchline the lore keeps circling back to. Street gangs get raided, mafias get RICO'd, cartels get their compounds blown up. But the IA, the FIB, Merryweather, Avon's paramilitary startup, even Clifford itself, all operate on a level where crime and policy are the same thing. Grab some snacks, because the next step in the timeline is asking who actually runs the world when the criminals are the ones writing the laws. If you ain't sleeping, grab some snacks, because this is a long one and the story of who runs crime in Gita eventually leaves the city completely. It sails out into the ocean, lands on a private island, and starts doing rails off a golden rifle. Juan Strickler, better known as El Rubio, is one of those characters who only really makes sense when you zoom out from Grove Street corners and Liberty City alleys. He's a Colombian drug lord who literally owns his own Caribbean island, Cayo Perico, and he turns it into a combined cocaine factory, offshore bank, and permanent influencer party. During normal gameplay, you just hear about him as this ghost story in cartel circles. But when you actually get there, it's revealed that the whole place is basically a narco Disneyland, built to remind everyone he can't be touched. The operation is structured like a paranoid billionaire read too many military manuals. You've got patrol boats circling the island, radar towers, air defenses that will swat you out of the sky, and guards who are somehow both drunk and insanely accurate. Inside the compound, he's laundering money through art, bearer bonds, and random heirlooms, because why not steal from history while you're at it? It's also revealed that El Rubio isn't just some lone wolf. He's plugged into Los Santos through people like the Madrazo family, moving product into the city while pretending they're just trading files and favors. Your role in Jita Online is basically to be the first person rude enough to call his bluff. You case the island as a fake party guest, sneak around taking pictures of guard routes, power stations, and vault doors, and then come back later in a submarine, stealth chopper, or whatever ridiculous entry method you picked. The heist is about money, but it's believed that the bigger hit is to his reputation, because the whole underworld has been told Cayo Perico is untouchable. When you walk out with his panther statue or his files on the Madrazos, you're not just robbing a guy, you're puncturing the myth that these offshore empires are actually secure. In reality, Cayo Perico is Rockstar showing how far cartels have evolved across the series. You started with the Colombian cartel in Gita 3 moving coke through Liberty City docks. Then you had guys like Martin Madrazo in Gita V, using lawyers, kidnappings, and quiet executions to hold power in San Andreas. El Rubio is the next step, transnational, fortress-backed, using private islands, submarines, and shell companies instead of just street soldiers. This would make a lot more sense in the context of the whole timeline, because you can see a straight line from dusty airstrips in San Andreas to nuclear sub heists in Online. And if an island full of cocaine and radar isn't the final form of a Cata cartel, the next organizations we're about to hit suggest the arms race isn't over yet. So when you zoom out from that island of cocaine and radar, you hit the real question. Who actually runs Los Santos? The guys on the corners, or the people flying over them in private jets? If you ain't sleeping, this is where the neighborhood stories start colliding with the global stuff. On the ground level, you've got the families, the Ballas, the Varios Los Aztecas, and the Los Santos Vagos. These are old names. The Ballas family's feud is basically the HD remake of Grove Street vs. Ballas from San Andreas, just with more smartphones and fewer green jerseys. Each crew is locked to turf: Chamberlain Hills, Strawberry, Rancho, La Puerta. They live and die over colors, respect, and who controls little economies like corner weed spots, mid-level meth, and protection rackets. Franklin starts in that world, running repo jobs for Simeon and doing drive-bys with Lamar, because for him the hood is still the main map. But the game keeps hinting that those sets are only one layer. Above them you've got cartels like Martin Madrazo's family and El Rubio's operation on Cayo Perico, corporate empires like Devin Weston's investment machine, and even state-sanctioned criminals like Merryweather and the Fib. Devin doesn't care which gang owns which block. He cares who owns the air rights and the union contracts. Madrazo's people can make a family shot caller disappear with a single phone call. It's also revealed that by the time of GTA Online, your own character can build something bigger than any of the old neighborhoods, running bunker guns, nightclub product, and agency, hits that move silently through the whole state. Over time, Rockstar keeps showing that the street guys are losing ground. In San Andreas, Grove Street was still a serious power, but even then they were getting squeezed by the local syndicate and corrupt cops like Tenpenny. By GTA V, the families in Ballas are stuck in Lawrence stalemates, while Devin Weston casually orders hits on union leaders and tries to erase Michael's entire life for a tax write-off. The gangs become pawns or collateral. The Fib uses them as disposable assets during stings, and Madrazo uses them as muscle you never even see on screen. In reality, the people with drones, lawyers, and PR teams are more dangerous than the ones with purple bandanas. Franklin's whole arc explains this shift. He starts as a small-time gangbanger, but the moment he links up with Michael, he's pulled into FIB-backed heists, government black ops, and eventually Lester's assassination economy. The endgame for him is a Vinewood Hills mansion, not a rebuilt Grove Street. GTA Online doubles down on that idea. You begin stealing cars and doing Gerald's low-level drug runs, but the progression system pushes you toward CEOs, MC president work, and finally full-blown international networks with submarines, island raids, and phone calls from Madrazo's kid. It's believed that by late game online, you're quietly outranking half the named NPCs in the story. So the street gangs still matter. They give Los Santos its culture, its slang, its tragedies. They're the emotional anchor for characters like Franklin and Lamar, and they remind you that all this high-level crime lands on real blocks. But the real rulers of the city are the ones who can move money, data, and product across borders, not just across Davis. And the scary part is, once you see who's really on top in Los Santos, the next city on the timeline starts to look even worse. And if you thought the street sets were messy, grab some snacks, because the biker scene takes that same chaos and puts it on two wheels. The Lost MC basically lets you watch an entire criminal organization live, die, and then get farmed for RP in GTA Online. The Lost Motorcycle Club starts out as the heart of the Lost and Damned. Johnny Klebitz is vice president turned reluctant leader, trying to keep the Alderney chapter together, while Billy Gray is in and out of rehab and prison. The whole thing is sold to you as brotherhood, democracy, and loyalty, with votes at the clubhouse and guys calling each other brother every 2 sentences. But during that story, it's also revealed that the club is rotting from the inside, because Billy is skimming, people are using, and every loyal decision just drags them into more wars. By the time you meet them again in GTA V, that slow rot is over. It's believed that Trevor's first big act in the HD timeline is wiping out Johnny's entire future in one scene, during a meth-fueled argument on a dirt road. Johnny goes from protagonist to pavement stain in seconds, and the rest of the Lost and Blaine County are reduced to angry side mission targets and random shootouts around Stab City. In reality, this would make a lot more sense in the context of a cartel war or an agency hit, but here It's just Trevor being Trevor, and an entire club's history getting bulldozed by a new main character. After that, the Lost mostly exist as a recurring enemy faction. You raid their labs, torch their bikes, steal their weapons, and in online they're basically a traveling discount store that shoots back. Their fall shows you the full arc, respected crew, tragic victims, then generic gang icon on your minimap. Biker culture in Jita always leans on the fantasy. You get the leather cuts, the anti-authority speeches, the sense that the open road is more honest than the city. But the games keep undercutting it with betrayal, addiction, and guys who can't adapt to a world of private security firms and drone strikes. Loyalty sounds good over beers in the clubhouse. It sounds a lot weaker when someone's offering a better gun or a better paycheck. Then Jita Online hands that whole fantasy to you with a UI. You can register as an MC president, invite friends as prospects, buy a clubhouse, and suddenly brotherhood is a tab in a menu. Coke lockup in one county, meth lab in another, forgery office downtown, all linked into a neat little supply chain. You're not really a biker, you're a logistics manager with a Western gargoyle. That's where the tension kicks in. The game tells you this is your crew, your family, but the actual meta is profit per hour, sell missions, and who can grind without falling asleep. If you ain't sleeping, you're probably resupplying. Loyalty becomes don't leave mid-sell, and betrayal is just someone alt-tabbing during a raid. It's darkly funny that the most outlaw roleplay in GTA is also one of the most optimized spreadsheets. And this isn't just the bikers. Across the series, so many groups start as tight-knit crews or families and end up acting like corporations, with ranks, upgrades, and product lines. The Lost MC's journey from brotherhood to background asset is basically a preview of what happens when every gang in the franchise gets monetized, scaled up, and turned into content for the next, even bigger operation waiting in the shadows. You see that with the Lost getting turned into content, and if you ain't sleeping, grab some snacks, because this is a long one in GTA terms. The same thing basically happens to the classic mafias. Back in the 3D era, the Leone family is the template. Salvatore Leone isn't just another boss. He's the gravity well of Liberty City. In GTA the 3 and Liberty City stories, he controls unions, construction, politicians, and whole neighborhoods. And every other gang is either trying to work with him or survive him. It's also revealed that even when you're playing as Claude or Tony, you're really just orbiting Salvatore's paranoia and health problems while he runs the city like a dying king who still owns the castle. The Forelli family and Sindaccos fill out that old school triangle. In San Andreas, the Forellis are still nursing grudges from Liberty City and sending hitmen across the country, while the Sindaccos show up in Las Venturas as the guys who think investing in casinos will save them. During Vice City stories and Vice City, you see this whole Italian ecosystem stretching from Vice to Liberty to Venturas, with mobsters laundering money through hotels, cab companies, and especially the Venturas casinos that CJ and Woozy eventually steal out from under them. In reality, those three families basically are organized crime in that era. Everyone else feels like a side hustle next to them. Then you hit the HD era, and the Pegorino family in Alderney is sad. Jimmy Pegorino wants a commission seat so badly because it's believed that his family showed up late to the party and missed the golden years. By GTA 4th, he's stuck between the Enchiladas, who are bigger and better connected, and new players like the Russian mobs, Albanian loan sharks, and the Triads. The Enchiladas still have that traditional thing going on with sit-downs and honor, but they share the map now with biker gangs, African crews, and guys like Dmitry Raskolov who treat old codes like optional DLC. GTA 4th and V push that even further. Nico gets pulled between Faustin's Russian gang, Bulgarin's human trafficking network, the McRearys, the Pegorinos, and then the UL, paper and federal agencies, who are basically running their own shadow cartels. By the time you reach Los Santos, the Italian Mafia is background noise. You're dealing with the Madrazo Cartel, Merryweather, the Fib and IA, Chinese Triads, and tech-adjacent crooks like Jay Norris and Devin Weston. The power is in cartels, corporations, and agencies that can move money and weapons across borders with a phone call. In-universe, that shift actually makes sense. Law enforcement crackdowns and Ryko-style cases hit the old families hard. Generational change pushes younger criminals toward faster, less tradition-bound outfits, and global markets reward whoever can pivot into drugs, data, and private security contracts. This would make a lot more sense in the context of how GTA Online keeps handing you new businesses to run, from bunkers to nightclubs, while the Mafia stay frozen in time. Mafia stories used to be the backbone of GTA's crime world. Now they feel like one chapter in a much bigger underworld history, right before the era where governments and corporations start acting like the real crime bosses we're about to get into. So if you thought the Mafia's getting sidelined was bad, grab some snacks. Because the drug crews never left. They just kept mutating in the background like the world's worst heartbeat. Back in the 3D era, it's believed that the purest expression of this was the Colombian cartel in GTA 3. They're not subtle. They kidnap you, they bomb your jobs, and they run a straight-up cocaine pipeline into Liberty City, using construction sites and docks as their personal warehouse. Catalina hooks up with them, because they're the only ones crazy enough and rich enough to bankroll her plans. Over in Vice City, Ricardo Diaz is basically the face of 80s coke excess, running his mansion like a one-man Scarface remake, while the Vance crime family keeps getting dragged deeper into trafficking. In Vice City stories, you see Victor Vance start out trying to avoid drugs entirely, but after his brother Lance keeps cutting deals behind his back, the family business slides straight into cocaine just to survive. San Andreas shifts the focus from glamorous powder to crack on the corner. Suddenly it's not just rich guys in mansions, it's Ballas and Vagos, turning whole blocks purple and yellow, while Grove Street falls apart because everyone around them is getting hooked or paid off. Crack becomes the excuse for everything. Gang wars, police raids, and CJ's whole family getting torn up. It's also revealed that corrupt cops like Frank Tenpenny are basically running their own invisible cartel, using crash to flood neighborhoods with drugs and then clean them up when it's politically useful. In reality, the product is just another way to lock down communities and keep them fighting each other instead of looking up the food chain. By the time you hit the HD era, the cartels go global and a lot more corporate. Martin Madrazo's network in GTA V is less a street gang and more a board of directors with torture tools. He uses lawyers, politicians, and cousins like Javier to keep the coke and meth money flowing between Mexico and Los Santos. El Rubio takes it even further in GTA Online, turning his private island into a full-scale export machine with its own airstrips, subs, and armed guards, like if a DJ decided to become a nation-state. G to the Fourth and Online are full of unnamed suppliers and Eastern European connections, quietly moving heroin, coke, and pills through docks, clubs, and cargo ships, while the main characters argue over who gets the cut. Drugs quietly drive half the betrayals you see. Shipments go missing, people die, and someone always thinks they can do one big score and retire. That's what pulls Michael back into heists, what keeps Trevor relevant, and what makes Franklin's friends either broke or dead. In GTA Online, the game just says the quiet part out loud. Your cocaine lockup, meth lab, weed farm, acid lab, and nightclub product are the most reliable money you'll ever see. If you ain't sleeping, you're literally watching bars of narcotics turn into digital millions. This would make a lot more sense in the context of who's really letting you do that, and what kind of people treat global drug empires like a starter business, which is exactly where we're heading next. So when your bunker and coke lockup are printing money while you nap, it's because someone in a uniform decided to look the other way. The game acts like the LCPD and LSPD are your biggest enemies, but in reality they're just another crew fighting for a cut. On paper, Liberty City and Los Santos police are sworn enemies of every gang, cartel, and biker club. Sirens, wanted stars, helicopters, the whole show. But the series keeps showing you that behind that clean mission briefing voice, the departments are riddled with corruption, from one dirty patrolman taking a bribe to whole units acting like their own syndicate. Jita the Four Fiend has random cops shaking down street dealers, and radio chatter that casually suggests off-the-books beatings are just part of the job. Gita V pushes it even harder, with LSPD cruisers swarming poor neighborhoods while Vinewood executives do open fraud and barely get a parking ticket. The clearest example is still Officer Frank Tenpenny and CRASH in San Andreas. Tenpenny is technically a cop, but he treats Grove Street and the Ballas like chess pieces. During the early missions, he forces CJ to do hits, dispose of bodies, and sabotage rival cops, not because it's justice, but because it keeps CRASH in control of the crack trade. It's also revealed that Tenpenny and Pulaski protect the Ballas and drug suppliers when it suits them, then throw them under the bus when they need a scapegoat. Grove Street doesn't just lose territory to a rival gang, they lose it to a police unit that quietly chose which color stays on the block. Gita 4th and V zoom in on everyday behavior. In Liberty City, NO.OZ comes down like a military strike if you poke a bank, but white-collar guys like Bryce Dawkins and his circle are shielded by politics and PR. In Los Santos, you see LSPD cruisers parked outside liquor stores in Davis, harassing people for loitering, while Life Invader literally sells user data on TV, and the response is one FIB guy getting blown up and everyone moving on. It's believed that this uneven pressure is what keeps certain neighborhoods permanently on edge and permanently profitable. You also get missions where the line between cop and gangster completely blurs. Michael, Franklin, and Trevor rob the yacht for the FIB, kidnap suspects, and torture Mr. K, while FIB handlers cheer from the side. Franklin does repo work that feels like legal theft, then later works with Dave Norton and Steve Haynes, who are basically federal gang leaders. Even in online, you'll steal evidence for crooked detectives or deliver cash to off-duty officers who somehow always know where your warehouse is. At that point, who's the criminal? Pattern interrupt for you. The most important gang in your lobby might be wearing body armor and pensions. If you ain't sleeping, you can see that local police sit in the middle layer of the food chain, not as globally powerful as the FIB or YA, but still crucial. They decide which street gangs get raided, which cartels get tipped off, and who gets quietly sacrificed when someone higher up needs a clean headline, which sets up the real puppet masters we're heading into next. So when we talk about puppet masters, some of them never even show up in cutscenes. They're just shadows in the background, and if you ain't sleeping, this is where the fan theories start doing more work than the actual mission scripts. One of the biggest is the idea that the Leone family never really dies. Officially, they dominate Liberty City in GTA 3 and Liberty City Stories, then get pushed by other outfits. But fans point out that in the HD era, Liberty City and Alderney are full of generic Liberty City mob references, shell companies, and Italian ruin construction and waste management firms that feel very familiar. You get Alderney wise guys in GTA V who act exactly like Latira Leones, and it's believed that some of those unnamed families are basically the Leones under new branding, laundering money through front corporations because open mafia wars stopped being profitable after the 90s. This would make a lot more sense in the context of another big theory, the corporate mafia. In GTA V, you have Merryweather, Devin Weston's Maze of Holdings, and Life Invader. On paper, they're separate. One is a private army, one is a billionaire's investment web, one is a tech company that sells your data. But the way they move together during the story suggests a shared invisible board. Devin can pull Merryweather for off-the-books operations, while Life Invader's data harvesting quietly feeds the same elite circle. In reality, it plays like a modern version of the old crime families, just with better lawyers and PR teams instead of guys named Vinny. Radio chatter and background dialogue also feed into this. You'll hear mentions of unnamed South American cartels, mysterious island suppliers, and off-screen drug wars. After GTA Online introduced Madrazo's expanded network and El Rubio's island, people started connecting the dots. Those throwaway cartels on talk radio and single-player might be early or later incarnations of the same groups, shifting names as bosses get killed or extradited. It's also revealed that some NPCs casually reference that guy in the islands, or the Mexicans people long before El Rubio fully appears, which explains why fans treat these as a loose, evolving super cartel rather than totally separate organizations. Then you've got the wild part, your own online organization. Because Rockstar keeps things vague, a lot of players treat their CEO, MC, and agency as canon. It's believed that the reason certain NPC gangs seem weaker, or just vanish in later updates, is because the player base basically annihilated them. Dug in control of the casino? Eroded by heists. Madrazo's total dominance? Under constant pressure from freelance CEOs. If you ain't sleeping, you can read the entire evolving map of Los Santos crime as a scoreboard for whatever the average player has been grinding that year. Rockstar almost never confirms any of this outright, but the recycled surnames, recurring accents, and familiar business fronts keep inviting you to imagine one giant, messy shared universe. And once you start looking at it that way, you can't help wondering who, if anyone, actually sits at the very top of this food chain we've been climbing. So to keep your brain from melting while we climb that food chain, you kind of need a mental map. If you ain't sleeping, this is the part where you can quietly organize every city in your head, so the rest of the video actually sticks. Start with Liberty City. In the old top-down era, GTA 1 and 2 only really show you loose syndicates and generic Russian or Yakuza types fighting for blocks. It's believed those early outfits are the ancestors of the later Liberty Mafias, but by the late 90s you're in the Leone, Forelli, Sindacco era. During Liberty City stories in 1998, Salvatore Leone's family is grinding down the Forellis and Sindaccos, with Tony Cipriani helping turn the Leones into the main Italian power. By GTA 3 in 2001, the Leones still look strong on paper, but the Colombian cartel and Yardis are already eating into them, which explains why the city feels like it's slipping away from old-school mob control. Then Rockstar hard reboots into the HD timeline. By GTA 4 around 2008, Liberty's Italians are fractured. Pegorinos in Alderney, Enchiladas and Gambetas in the city, all paranoid and shrinking. It's also revealed that Eastern European crews like Faustins and Bulgarians, plus the Albanians and Russians, are the ones actually pushing weight and pulling triggers. Nico's story basically shows you that Liberty has gone from Godfather to post-Soviet crime drama. Vice City is easier to lock in time. Vice City Stories in 1984 is the warm-up, where the Vance brothers are broke, scattered, and trying to build something while fighting bikers, the Cholos, and shady army officers. They never fully own the city. They just survive. 2 years later in 1986, during GTA, Vice City, you hit the cocaine boom. Ricardo Diaz is the big tropical mansion guy. The Cubans and Haitians run their own neighborhoods. And the Vance name is basically down to Tommy and Lance, trying to get their cut. After Tommy kills Diaz and takes his estate, the Versetti outfit becomes the de facto ruling family, with Sonny Forelli's old influence getting cut off at the knees. San Andreas and Los Santos are more about turf than families. In 1992, during Guita, San Andreas, Los Santos is split between Grove Street families, Ballas, Vagos, and Barrios Los Aztecas. Grove used to run things, but by the time CJ comes home the Ballas and crack cocaine have hollowed them out. San Fierro is mostly Triads and Danang boys, while Las Venturas is a mafia theme park for the Leones, Sindaccos, and Forellis. Modern Los Santos in Yatatá shifts that. You've still got families and Ballas, but they're pushed to the margins while guys like Martin Madrazo, the O'Neills, and other cartel-linked suppliers quietly make the real money. Then Yata Online stretches that even further. Player CEOs, MCs, and gun-running organizations, Merryweather Security, the Duggan Petro family, and foreign cartels start to overshadow classic gangs just because they're plugged into global money, private armies, and corrupt FIB contacts. This would make a lot more sense in the context of latest stage capitalism if it wasn't also a grind simulator. So when you think about it, each city goes from colorful street crews and loud mafias to quieter, richer enemies. The next step is breaking down who actually survives those transitions and which names keep crawling back from the dead. And the wild part is, a lot of those names only survive on paper. On the streets, most of these organizations die the same way. They eat themselves from the inside. You see the pattern over and over, and if you ain't sleeping, you start to recognize it pretty fast. You get the leader who starts out hungry and sharp, then gets consumed by ego. Jimmy Pecorino is a good example in IV. He's a mid-tier Alderney boss who thinks he's a king, so he drags his whole family into a doomed war because he can't accept that he's small time. Billy Gray does the same thing in The Lost and Damned. He gets the presidency, gets hooked on fame and hard drugs, and suddenly the Brotherhood is just a prop for his habit and his image. In reality, the gang stops being a family and turns into one guy's self-destruct button. Then you have the lieutenants, the guy stuck between loyalty and survival. Johnny Klebitz spends an entire game trying to hold the Lost together while Billy burns it down. Lance Vance in Vice City is another one. He wants respect, he wants a cut, and he's tired of living in his brother's shadow. So when things get hot, he flips on Tommy because he thinks siding with Diaz or Sonny will keep him alive. It's believed that most of these betrayals aren't about sudden evil. They're about people who are terrified of being left behind. Big Smoke is probably the cleanest example. He sells out Grove Street to the Ballas and corrupt CRASH. Not just for money, but for security and status in a city that's changing around him. The game never says he stopped loving the hood. It just quietly shows you that he loves being untouchable more. Dmitry Raskolov takes it even further. He doesn't just betray Nico once, he keeps double-crossing anyone who trusts him, because paranoia and profit are the only things he believes in. And on the other side you have Trevor Phillips, who reacts to disloyalty with nuclear force. The second he thinks the Lost betrayed him, or that Michael lied about Brad, he goes straight to torture and executions. That explains why Trevor Phillips Industries is powerful but tiny. Nobody sane wants to work for a guy who might cave your skull in over a bad vibe. What makes it hit harder is that Gita frames these groups as found families. Grove Street is CJ's real home because his biological family is broken. The Lost are the only people who ever gave Johnny structure. Even the Fib crews and Merryweather squads act like ugly office families, with barbecues and fake banter during Black Ops torture. So when someone like Smoke or Lance flips, it feels like a cousin stabbing you at dinner, not just a coworker stealing your stapler. Most of these outfits don't fall because of the cops. They fall because of addiction, paranoia, greed, and this constant fear that the person next to you is about to cut a side deal. Dimitri's empire collapses the second his lies catch up. The Lost implode under Billy's drug use and snitching. Even high-end groups like the Duggins and the Madrazos in online spend as much time backstabbing each other as they do fighting you. Grab some snacks and look at it from a distance. The police and rivals just finished the job that the internal rot already started. And that's why you get attached as a player. You know these are fictional criminals, but the emotions are familiar. Wanting respect, fearing betrayal, chasing security, clinging to a crew that feels like home even when it's toxic, that all mirrors real human fears and desires. This would make a lot more sense in the context of just being satire, but Gita keeps giving you quiet moments of loyalty and hurt that feel uncomfortably real. The next step is seeing who actually learns from that cycle. Some leaders adapt, some lieutenants break the pattern, and some cities just reset with a fresh batch of doomed families waiting to repeat the same mistakes. And the game actually tells you who's adapting and who's getting wiped out, but it does it in the noisiest, easiest to ignore way possible. If you ain't sleeping, grab some snacks, because this is a long one in terms of background lore. In Gita, the real underworld news is on the radio. You'll be driving, half listening to Weasel News, and they casually mention a major cartel bust off the coast or a Liberty City crime family under federal investigation. That one line quietly explains why a certain gang suddenly stops showing up in missions after a specific point in the story. It's also revealed that some of the biggest power shifts never get a cutscene. They just get a throwaway headline between ads for ego-boosting protein powder and corrupt politicians. Talk radio does the same thing, but from the street level. You get callers ranting about those Ballas hanging around the rec center again, or someone complaining that the Vagos are shaking down taco trucks. It sounds like background comedy, but it suggests turf lines, recruitment pushes, and which neighborhoods are being squeezed that week. This would make a lot more sense in the context of a living city if you remember that Rockstar is basically using the callers as unpaid crime reporters. Then you have Life Invader and Bleeder post quietly outing the corporate side of it. A junior employee at a security firm, whining about another off-the-books shipment with Merryweather, tells you exactly how paramilitary groups are laundering contracts. A Vinewood assistant subtweeting a producer about those meetings with the Madrazos confirms a cartel studio pipeline that never gets spelled out during the main missions. In reality, half the corporate scandals in Gita only exist as fake social media drama. The physical city backs this up. Graffiti tags aren't just decoration, they're a map. Families' crowns and Ballas purple on opposite ends of a block explain why a random drive-by might erupt if you stop your car too long. Old Los Santos Vagos tags, painted over by Marabunta Grande art, tell you who won the last invisible war. Billboards owned by certain corporations, like endless ads for a single energy drink in a rough area, quietly mark which brand is paying which gang to protect their distribution. Even NPC small talk fills in the gaps. Two dock workers complaining about that private security outfit stealing our overtime are talking about Merryweather undercutting union muscle. A bartender gossiping about some rich Texan family buying up casinos is foreshadowing the Duggins before you ever meet them. It's believed that if you stitched every overheard line together, you'd have a full crime documentary running under the main story. Once you start listening to all this, the cities stop feeling like mission hubs and start feeling like ecosystems. Gangs, cartels, mafias, and corporations are constantly making moves off-screen, reacting to busts, betrayals, and hostile takeovers you only hear about as static. If you replay the games with that in mind, you'll notice a whole second layer of underworld lore humming in the background like white noise, which sets up how the next era of organization steps into those power vacuums. And all that white noise is tied to where people actually live. Gita's gangs don't just float in the air. They grow out of specific streets, cul-de-sacs, and dead-end blocks that the game keeps dragging you back to. If you ain't sleeping, you start to notice that the map itself is basically one big crime diagram. Take Grove Street and Chamberlain Hills. The game quietly shows you cracked sidewalks, busted streetlights, liquor stores, and pawn shops, but almost no real investment. It's believed that these areas are deliberately framed as underfunded and over-policed, with cops cruising slow and helicopters circling during even minor disturbances. Because nobody in power is putting money into schools or jobs, the families and the Ballas end up offering the only steady income and protection. Franklin's whole arc explains this. Before he's repoing cars for Simeon, he's just another guy trying not to get stuck on a corner that's already claimed. Liberty City does the same thing with places like Broker and Dukes. You get these cramped apartment blocks, half-finished construction sites, and people arguing on stoops about rent. Nico is surrounded by small-time hustlers and desperate immigrants because the neighborhood is set up as a pressure cooker. It's also revealed that the petty robberies and protection rackets you see are just symptoms of that larger economic squeeze, not random evil. The game never says this is a sociology lecture, but it quietly shows you why gangs feel like the only safety net. Then you drive a few miles and Los Santos flips the script. Vinewood Hills, Rockford Hills, Algonquin's financial district in IV, all look clean and safe. But the crime just wears a suit. Life Invader, the Richards Majestic Crowd, the Liberty City Banks Nico hits, they're all part of white-collar syndicates that operate behind glass doors and legal loopholes. In reality, a Ponzi scheme in a skyscraper can do more damage than a drive-by on Forum Drive. It just doesn't leave spray-painted tags. Physical barriers on the map make this even clearer. Freeways, rivers, and rail lines slice Los Santos into little fiefdoms. Crossing the LS River by Grove Street, you start seeing different graffiti, different lowriders, different NPC idle animations. The way Ballas lean on cars or how Vagos hang around alleys basically broadcasts who owns what. Missions like Hood Safari or when Franklin walks into Balla Turf during Free Roam show how fast things turn hostile the second you're on the wrong side of an invisible line. One block over, same city, completely different rules. This would make a lot more sense in the context of real-world urban planning, where highways were literally dropped between rich and poor areas. But Gita turns that into gameplay. You feel it every time a random NPC shouts at you for wearing the wrong color. And as the series moves from these street corners into full-scale mafias, cartels, and private armies, those same rules of power, poverty, and place don't go away. They just get taller buildings, bigger guns, and much scarier borders you're about to cross. And those borders are exactly where you'd be standing. Because if you ain't sleeping, you're basically filling out a criminal job application in your head right now. So, say you start small. You roll with a street gang like the Families or the Ballas. Day one isn't a contract, it's an initiation. You're getting jumped in behind a liquor store, or you're putting in work on a drive-by before anyone even remembers your name. Your world shrinks to a few blocks of Davis or Strawberry. Colors suddenly matter more than oxygen. And every walk to the corner store feels like a coin flip between nothing happens and Ballas sedan turns the street into a kill box. The upside is local respect. That feeling that this sidewalk is yours. The downside is that in reality, the ceiling is low. You might move from lookout to shooter to small-time shot caller, but the real money is still flowing past you, up into people you never see. Now imagine you skip the cul-de-sac wars and jump straight into someone like Martin Madrazo's orbit. On paper, it looks better. Cleaner houses, bigger paydays, actual plans instead of we'll figure it out in the car. You're guarding cartel meetings in Vinewood Hills, running quiet hits in the desert, maybe even flying product through Blaine County. It's also revealed that failure here doesn't mean getting clowned at the barbershop. It means your whole family disappears between cutscenes. Madrazo smiles at you during the barbecue, but that smile suggests he already knows how he'd have you killed if you ever talked. The operations are professional. but loyalty from the top is not. If that sounds too corporate, you could prospect for the Lost MC. This would make a lot more sense in the context of someone who thinks brotherhood fixes everything. You're doing dangerous runs on choppers held together by duct tape, smuggling meth, guns, or whatever Trevor hasn't blown up yet. And you're living by club rules that reach into every part of your life. You call them brothers, but half the clubhouse is too high to remember your real name. And internal beef can get you shot faster than any rival gang. It's believed that a lot of prospects die before they ever get a full patch, and the ones who live just get invited to worse parties. Pattern interrupt, you could also end up in a cubicle. You sign with Merryweather or work under Devin Weston's umbrella. Now you've got key cards, NDAs, and a view of the city from a glass tower. Your crimes come with HR paperwork. You're securing assets, protecting shareholder value, or arranging a hostile takeover that just happens to involve blowing up a rival's convoy on the freeway. On the surface, it's all clean offices and plausible deniability, but the body count attached to your email drafts is way higher than most gangbangers will ever rack up. So where do you fit? Street colors, cartel suits, biker cuts, or business casual war crimes? Or, after hearing all this, do you just stay that solo heister or self-made CEO in GTA Online, building your own little empire so you only have to betray yourself? And the funny part is, once you zoom out from your own little empire, you start to see who actually wins in GTA's underworld, and who just burns bright, fast, and stupid. The biggest winners are kind of depressing, because they're barely human. In GTA Online, your CEO offices, motorcycle clubs, bunker operations, and nightclubs quietly outgrow almost every NPC gang we've talked about. The game literally shows this shift by the time the Diamond Casino, the Cayo Perico heist, and the agency updates drop. It's believed that outfits like the Duggins, or even the Madrazo Cartel, are basically supporting actors in your story. You're the one hijacking Merryweather shipments, laundering money through arcades, and turning cartels into suppliers instead of kings. Then you've got the corporate and state winners. Merryweather, the Fib, IA, Life Invader style tech creeps. All those corrupt institutions that keep their offices, their budgets, and their lawyers, no matter how many missions you ruin. You blow up a Merryweather freighter with Michael and Trevor, and a few years later in online they're still flying private armies around the map like nothing happened. That suggests the real top tier in GTA isn't the guy on the corner. It's the logo on the building. The cartels that survive, like what we hear about through Martin and Javier Madrazo, or the off-screen Cayo Perico network, do it by going offshore or underground. They retreat into compounds, private islands, shell companies, and offshore accounts. In reality, the more chaos you cause in Los Santos, the more it just pushes serious product and money further out of sight. On the other side, the losers are almost always the ones who stay local. The Forelli and Sindacco families get shredded across San Andreas and Liberty City stories, while the Leone family, who once anchored the whole Liberty City Mafia timeline, slowly fades into background radio mentions and throwaway dialogue. The Lost MC goes from being Trevor's uneasy ally to a pile of bodies in the desert, because one meth-fueled biker decided to headbutt a tornado. Rural outfits like the O'Neills never stood a chance. One bad phone call, one angry Trevor, and their entire bloodline gets written off in a single rampage. Street gangs like the Families and Ballas are still standing in GTA V, but they're trapped. Grove Street gets a partial comeback with Franklin's rise, and it's also revealed that their colors still mean something on those few blocks, but they never fully escape Davis and Strawberry, while the real money moves through hedge funds, private security contracts, and Vinewood accounting tricks. Tommy Vercetti feels like a winner when Vice City ends, running a full-blown crime family from his mansion. This would make a lot more sense in the context of a happy ending, But the later games quietly suggest time moves on without him. New cartels, new families, no Vercetti brand on the billboards. The Leone family survives into GTA 3's era, yet they've clearly lost that central, untouchable aura. They're still dangerous, just not the center of the universe anymore. So, if you ain't sleeping yet, grab some snacks, because in the final stretch we're going to pull the camera all the way back. Not just who won or lost, but what Gita's whole criminal history actually says about this world, and why no matter how many bodies drop, the same shapes keep repeating. So when you pull the camera back like this, Gita's whole criminal history starts to look less like a bunch of random gangs and more like one long argument about power. Who gets it? Who keeps it? And who gets buried under it when the deal goes bad? From a couple of pixelated bank robbers in 1997 to you raiding private islands and data centers in online, the pattern doesn't really change, it just keeps getting louder. Every time you meet a new crew, it's basically the same question with a different costume. The Leones in Liberty City, the Vance family in Vice City, the Madrazo Cartel, Merryweather, the Fib, even your own CEO office and bunker setups in online. The game keeps asking what people are willing to do to stay on top, whether that top is a cold sack in Ganton or a Vinewood Hills mansion guarded by ex-military contractors. In reality, the scale changes, but the paranoia doesn't. You also see this weird mirror effect where institutions start acting like gangs, and gangs start acting like institutions. The Fib tortures people in a warehouse like any back alley crew. Merryweather runs protection rackets with NDAs instead of baseball bats. At the same time, Grove Street paints colors, sets up rules, and talks about territory like they're running a city council. The Lost MC has bylaws and votes, even while they're cooking meth behind a gas station. It's believed that this is Rockstar's way of saying the difference between legit and criminal power is mostly branding. And stuck in the middle are people like Nico, CJ, Franklin, Tommy, Luis, all the way down to guys like Wade or Tanya. They're not masterminds. They're just trying to buy their mom a house, pay off a debt, or get out of a neighborhood that keeps shrinking around them. The Ballas versus families war, the Leone versus Sindacco beef, the Duggins trying to crush the casino, it all plays out way above their heads, but it still decides who lives on their block and how long they get to stay there. Over time, the series shifts from simple cops and robbers setups to these full ecosystems. Cartels feed money into clubs. Clubs launder for mafias. Mafias cut deals with agencies. Agencies quietly hire you. It's also revealed that even when you're the player running your own organization and online, you're still just another piece on the board. One more interchangeable boss who can be replaced by the next login screen. So if you ain't sleeping, think about which group actually stuck with you the most. Was it Grove Street's doomed loyalty? Madrazo's cold efficiency, Trevor Phillips Industries turning chaos into a business plan, or the faceless firepower of Merryweather showing up whenever someone rich gets nervous? This would make a lot more sense in the context of a nighttime tour, and that's basically what this whole video has been. One long drive through Gita's darkest corners, watching the lights of all these organizations blur past your window. And now we're slowly heading back up to street level, where the city looks quiet again, but you know exactly what's moving underneath it. So yeah, if you're still here right now, you've basically done a full underworld tour on hard mode. Over 2 hours of gangs, mafias, cartels, biker clubs, fake corporations, and those not-so-secret agencies. And if you tapped out and fell asleep somewhere around the Leone timeline or the Merryweather mess, that's fine, because this is a long one on purpose. In reality, this whole thing was meant to feel like cruising the map at night with the radio on low. From those tiny, pixelated syndicates in the old top-down games, all the way to Gita online empires with CEOs, MC presidents, and bunker managers. We've watched crews rise, fall, and respawn as Rockstar's world got more complex and more petty at the same time. Every era swapped who owned the streets, but the pattern stayed the same. Somebody grabs power, somebody else gets jealous, and the city quietly updates the body count. If you ain't sleeping and your brain is still doing side missions, there are a few easy lore paths we could drive down next. One is a full history of the Fib and Ya, treating them like the rival gangs they basically are. That would mean tracking every black bag job from the North Yankton deal, to the torture scene, to all the times they weaponize guys like Michael or your Jita online character, because it's cheaper than hiring real contractors. It's also revealed that half their counter-terror work is just budget wars and petty office politics. Another route is going completely character-focused and doing a trauma map of every GTA protagonist. Michael's fake death, Trevor's childhood with Mrs. Phillips, Nico's war crimes, CJ losing his mom, Tommy getting set up in Vice City, even the silent guys from the early games who just absorb chaos without saying a word. This would make a lot more sense in the context of how these criminal organizations recruit broken people, then pretend it's all about loyalty and honor while they throw them under the bus the second a deal goes bad. Or we could park in one city and stay there. Every era of Liberty City explained, from the Leone family anchoring the old mafia days to the Russian and Albanian outfits carving it up later, with Alderney sitting off to the side like the place you dump bodies and stash witnesses. Vice City has the Vance crime family trying to build something on top of a graveyard of failed coke operations, and Los Santos keeps looping the families versus Ballas feud like a rerun everybody pretends is brand new. If you're somehow awake, you can queue up another lore video, drop a comment about your favorite Get That organization, or just let autoplay drag you into the next rabbit hole while you stare at the ceiling. If you did knock out halfway through, you'll probably wake up to some guy explaining why a Life Invader intern is secretly the most important character in the series. So as we drift out, just picture it, the lights of Los Santos, Liberty City, and Vice City all glowing like nightlights on the edge of the map, freeways humming, docks loading containers, little clusters of pixels meeting in alleyways to move guns and cash while you're not looking. It's believed that every one of those lights is some tiny crime happening off screen, some deal you'll never play, but that still shapes the world you drive through. And when you're ready, we can zoom back in on one of those lights and follow it all the way down to the next story, where one small job quietly changes everything you thought you knew about who really runs these cities. So now, instead of zooming in on one of those lights, we're just going to let the whole map breathe for a second. Picture Los Santos from way up, the grid of streets fading into a soft blur, while down on one corner the families are still posted up, hoodies up, leaning on lowriders like the night never ended. A couple blocks over, some Ballas are doing the same thing, pretending not to watch them, pretending they're not also watching the same empty intersection. Out in the Vinewood Hills, Madrazo's guys are parked with the lights off, silhouettes in a luxury SUV, still keeping tabs on people who don't even know they're being remembered. And way out over the ocean, if you ain't sleeping and you listen close, you can almost hear a GTA Online CEO helicopter chopping through the air, running one more late-night cargo sale, because that next upgrade is always just one more run away. Liberty City still got a deli light buzzing in Broker, with some non-name whiz guy doing collections for a family that used to answer to the Leones. Vice City's shoreline is still outlined in neon, and it's believed that somewhere behind a frosted glass office door, a Vansa-style operation is arguing about whether the next shipment goes by sea or air. San Andreas freeways are still looping around each other, and every on-ramp suggests another crew merging into the underworld traffic you never fully see. The thing it thought keeps quiet, but never really hides, is that the underworld doesn't clock out. The cartels don't put up an out to lunch sign. Merryweather doesn't stop answering calls just because you turned your console off. And some fib handler is always drafting a new off-books operation that looks a lot like a heist. But you can sleep. The stories will still be here tomorrow night, or after a week, or after a couple of months when you suddenly remember a name and want to know who they really were. Because tracking all these gangs, cartels, mafias, biker crews, and fake legit corporations is really just tracking how people keep trying to build little structures around chaos. A hood puts on green or purple to feel like the street is predictable. A cartel draws lines on a map and calls it territory, even though one bad deal can erase it overnight. A billionaire CEO in online builds a whole empire menu with warehouses and businesses, and it's also revealed that a single random griefing jet can wipe out an hour of hard work in 3 seconds. Sometimes those structures hold for a while. The Leone name carries weight across multiple games. The Ballas and family's feud survives whole console generations. The Madrazo Cartel keeps inserting itself into new deals like it's allergic to retirement. Other times, a dynasty just quietly dissolves into radio references and background pedestrians who used to know a guy. This would make a lot more sense in the context of real life if you think about how fast real headlines cycle out. So if you want more, you already know where to look. This channel's library is basically its own little criminal archive, just sitting there in the dark, full of failed heists, lost side characters, and half-remembered conspiracies waiting for you to pull a file and open it again. For now though, let the camera drift back from a quiet Los Santos side street. One tired sedan rolls through a red light under a flickering street lamp. No cops, no shootout, just the soft hum of an engine. The city noise sinks into a distant low buzz, like you turn the volume down on the whole map. And then, when you're finally ready to let it go for the night, that hum fades out too, and the streets go silent.